and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 2nd of February. Today, the man suspected to be behind the Clapham chemical attack was reportedly a failed asylum seeker, as police warn members of the public to stay away from the individual whilst the hunt continues.
Teenagers convicted of 16-year-old Brianna Ghey's murder are set to be named as they face life behind bars.
The government offers £1,000 to encourage people to join the childcare sector amid concerns over its rollout of free hours.
Don't swipe right for love. A report reveals that romance fraud has increased by a fifth. We'll be speaking to someone who was scammed out of thousands of pounds.
And in sport, Wolves lose to Manchester United with virtually the last kick of the game last night, and F1 fans still reeling from Lewis Hamilton's move to Ferrari.
It's very mild out there this morning. It's also a fairly cloudy day. Gusty for some of us with wet weather in western Scotland. A full forecast for today and for Saturday coming up shortly.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
A quick one before we get going. Would you like to be wolf whistled?
Oh, no.
Because there's all this
Never
thing...
really liked it at all. There's something...
There's this thing in The Sun this morning, and it's actually from a while ago, that Davina McCall, she's now 56, but when she says when she was 45, what she hated was she felt invisible because no one wolf whistled her anymore. She also says, obviously, I wouldn't want to be harassed.
But it is, really, isn't it?
Is it?
It's a very old-fashioned form of misogyny, I think.
Do you think?
I used to have to walk to school, walk to the train station. It was a long walk, and I dreaded going past a sort of building site that was local there. I used to deliberately take a long diversion in the end because you would get wolf whistled, and it felt like harassment. It did.
It's not
And I've never really liked it
harassment.
since it's... I don't know, it's a bit too objectifying and...
See, I've had the equivalent when I was in Spain, actually only last year, and some women leaned out of a car and were yelling...
Well, don't you find that...
Hola, chico. Hola. No, it was lovely. I loved it. I was like, cock of the walk. Brilliant.
I don't think either sex, wolf whistling either sex, it's just not on. It's saying, oh, you know, fancy you. It's not nice. I don't think it's nice. And I know people will say, oh, you're so, screwed up about that. But I'm not. I just think it's horrid.
Well, let us know what you think.
And I've come across a lot of interviews with slightly older television stars and people that, and you're asked that. You're asked, would you like to be wolf whistled, and do they wolf whistle you anymore? And a lot of older women say, well, I'd do anything to be wolf whistled nowadays. Well, I don't feel that way. No, I don't like it.
Oh, well, let us know what you think on that one. gbviews@gbnews.com.
But people do get very, polarised by that one.
Yeah,
the other thing is, if you were wolf whistled, you wouldn't be allowed to roll your eyes in response, would you? Because rolling your eyes is now, what do they call it? We'll talk about that later.
Oh, like a microaggression.
It's a microaggression, and people are being sent on, sort of courses that if you sit in a business meeting and somebody says something you don't like, you roll your eyes. That is apparently a form of microaggression. And somebody from HR will come and talk to you about it.
Sometimes I think the world has gone mad.
The world has gone mad.
Anyway, look, let's crack on with the main news today, because a police manhunt for the suspect in the London chemical attack is underway. It comes after it was revealed that 35-year-old Abdul Azidi was convicted of a sexual offence back in 2019. Sources say he was refused asylum twice before being granted leave to remain 2 years ago.
Now, the Met Police have warned the public to stay away after the attacker injured 12 people, including 5 police officers and, of course, 2 young children.
And he was last seen on the Caledonian Road in South London.
With what they're saying is a very noticeable injury to this side of his face.
Yes, it's in a lot of the papers this morning. What that is, I don't know. Let's talk to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley, who's here in the studio. Peter, good to see you. I mean, look, we sort of suspected they had their eye on someone yesterday. Is it just a matter of time for the police till they get this suspect now?
Well, hopefully that amount of time won't be too long, because it's getting on for 36 hours now or thereabouts since the attack took place. There are, of course, huge concerns about this man being at large. The public have been warned very, very clearly. Do not approach this man. Simply dial 999 if you see him. Of course, the events of Wednesday night would appear to be very serious. That would indicate just how dangerous this man possibly could be. And whilst I'm no medic, this wound to the right-hand side of his face looks to be considerable.
It does, doesn't it?
Well, do you think it is? I mean, is there any chance that's just a faulty camera?
Well, the police did say before the release of the image that he was going to have a significant injury to the right-hand side of his face.
No, I mean, if it is as bad as it looks, and that for those of you listening on the radio, I mean, it really does look as though a huge injury, particularly to the right eye and the lower cheek. he's going to have to seek medical assistance somewhere along the line.
Absolutely, and I would think that infection must be a very real possibility, so this man's health could tumble pretty quickly, I would imagine. But either way, with contacts in Northumbria, the Newcastle area, the possibility that he's used public transport, because British Transport Police are also now being called upon to assist in the hunt for this man. This is a bit of a race against time before potentially anybody else gets hurt, or before he's able to go so deep underground, so to speak, that it would be even more difficult to find him. But the police have called upon the public's help here by publishing the photograph, and I suspect, as is so often the case, it will be the great British public that provide the information that sees this man put in handcuffs.
Of course, what we're not getting at the moment is any updates on the victims, particularly on this.
Life-changing injuries.
The focus is on him, which is understandable at the moment. But yeah, talking life-changing injuries for the mother and the youngest daughter.
Yes, I mean, ghastly set of circumstances here, and there were some CCTV images released yesterday that are pretty unclear but give a sense of the horrors of what unfolded. And we heard so many witness testimonies yesterday from people that courageously went to try and help, which really in this day and age is heartwarming. And I know that some of them did suffer injuries, but it would appear that the Good Samaritans, none of them were severely injured. So for that, we need to be grateful.
But there seems to be a catalogue of really terrible mistakes leading up to this incident that we know very little about at the moment. What we're gleaning at the moment is that the man they're looking for was an asylum seeker. He came into Britain under a lorry in something like 2018, I think it was. He was turned down for asylum the first time, but he stayed and applied for asylum again about a year later and was turned down again, and yet for some reason managed to stay again, committed a sex offence, and then at his third application for asylum, he was granted asylum. I mean, you couldn't write it, you couldn't make it up.
Turned down twice and not deported. I'm not going to sugarcoat this at all. If anybody wants to appreciate the horrors that we have imported into this country, courtesy of governments, courtesy of the Home Office, courtesy of failings of the Border Force, just how much criminal vermin we have imported into this country, then go onto the internet and simply search asylum seeker convicted. There are a litany of cases of people committing the most serious crimes.
Why would we give asylum to somebody who has been convicted of anything?
Why not deport the person the moment they are convicted of a sex offence, which this man has been convicted? Just how much or how many dangerous, undocumented people are in this country that we, quite frankly, know nothing about? It is scandalous. There have been repeated failings, and I'm afraid as a result, we are all a bit less safe.
OK, Peter, for now, thank you. Well, teenagers convicted of murdering 16-year-old Brianna Ghey are due to be sentenced later on today.
The judge is set to release the names of the murderers, dubbed Boy X and Boy Y, arguing that there is, in fact, a strong public interest in lifting their anonymity.
Well, Mrs. Justice Yip said people will want to know their identities to understand how such a heinous act was committed.
GB News reporter Sophie Reaper has more on this.
A deadly influence on one another. Words used to describe the two youths responsible for the murder of transgender teenager Brianna Ghey. In February of last year, the then 15-year-olds known as Girl X and Boy Y carefully plotted and executed their plan to kill, luring their victim to Culcheth Linear Park in Warrington under the pretence of taking drugs. There, Brianna would be stabbed 28 times with a hunting knife and then left to die. In their trial at Manchester Crown Court, the two teenagers turned against one another, each blaming the other for Brianna's death. But in the end, the jury found them both guilty of murder. Both of Brianna's parents were present throughout the trial, and after hearing the guilty verdicts, her father spoke out about the impact the death of his daughter had on him.
I wish I had been there to protect her. That's something I must live with. The suffering from this horrific incident should never happen, and I hope no other family ever experience the torture this can bring.
Brianna's mother also gave a statement asking for people to show kindness to the families of her daughter's murderers.
Please have some empathy and compassion for the families of the young people convicted of this horrific crime. They too have lost a child, and they must live the rest of their lives knowing what their child has done.
Now, both girl X and boy Y face life sentences for their brutal murder of Brianna Ghey. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Well, Peter Blexley is still with us. Tell you what I'm struck by, Peter, in that is the response of Brianna's mother, actually, showing a huge amount of sympathy for the parents of the perpetrators.
Quite remarkable level of forgiveness, compassion and dignity. I have had the great honour of spending a lot of time with victims who have lost a loved one to murder, and quite frankly, it is those people that get the true life sentence. It is the loved ones that are left behind that have that sense of loss that will never, ever disappear. And whilst in some circumstances time makes people more able to cope, it does not strip away the pain, nor does it take away the loss.
Why would the judge in this case consider lifting the anonymity of the two murderers?
Because of public interest, and I commend Mrs Justice Yip. She's taken the absolute right decision here. The public do deserve to know who these killers were, and their names will be revealed later on today. Not only did they plot, plan and execute this appalling murder of Brianna, they'd drawn up a hit list of 4 other potential victims. Murder was their intent. A person sadly died. Others might have died had they not been apprehended. It is absolutely right that we know who they are.
Doesn't it have the possibility, though, of leading, because of their age, or at least age when it was all committed, that we end up a bit like the Bulger killers, where actually we then have to provide future identities and all the rest of it, presumably at taxpayer expense?
Possibly, but both these young people turn 18 next year, so in all likelihood we would have found out who they were whenever they reached their 18th birthdays. If there is a need for them to have a degree of protection by having false identities upon their release, whensoever that may be, and it's not going to be soon, because the level of planning and the brutality in this attack was absolutely hideous. Whensoever that time comes about, that will be a matter for the authorities to consider.
I mean, Peter, anyone watching at the moment and listening must be thinking, what the hell is happening to our society?
Knife crime is on the rise, other crimes are on the rise. Fraud is really the elephant in the room, and I know it's a crime that is not usually accompanied by violence, but millions of people are becoming victims of that, not to mention all the people every day who have their phones stolen, their bikes stolen, their cars stolen, their houses burgled, the shoplifting epidemic, and the list goes on and on. The police abandon the streets, the criminals have filled that void. Policing really needs to get its act together.
Yeah, I tell you what, though, Peter, and it's a difficult issue. There'll be lots of people watching and listening to this thinking, well, this is a disgrace. This lovely young woman has been killed. And yet, they may well be the same people who are joining in what is, in society at the moment, a lot of anti-trans rhetoric, not realising, because there is no way you could tell by looking at Brianna, that she was a trans woman. And this is part of the issue, actually.
Yeah, but they did draw up a list of other people who weren't trans. It wasn't necessarily a trans thing, was it?
Well, it might not have been, but I bet I bet it's part of the equation. And I just think we've got to address that, because we can say, well, this is horrific and this is an awful crime and all the rest of it, and yet still those people out there are pushing a lot of this. There's a lot of hate and problems in society when it comes to this issue.
There is sadly a shocking amount of hate, and I've just had the great honour of just returning from Poland, where I visited Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camps. And goodness me, if you want to see any worse example of man's inhumanity to man and what hatred can do to a soul, I strongly suggest you go and pay a visit. There is too much hate. There is too much crime. Crime is the police's issue. It are the streets that they really need to make once again a hostile environment for criminals. And if they do that and investigate crime properly, professionally, effectively, and lock up bad people, some crime will reduce.
OK.
Well, we've got to try, haven't we?
Yeah, well, we've got to try. Peter, thanks very much indeed, and let's hope we can be a little bit more tolerant as well, because what are we feeding and telling our children with some of our attitudes at the moment? Anyway, it's 16 minutes past 6. Let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom.
Well, the US has approved plans to strike Iranian targets in Syria and Iraq. Officials have said that these strikes will last a number of days. And this all comes after a drone attack killed 3 soldiers, of course, US soldiers, in Jordan on Sunday.
More than half of students used AI to help them with their studies. That's according to the UCAS Admission Service, which surveyed more than 1,200 undergraduates. Meanwhile, a separate report from the Higher Education Policy Institute says more than 1 in 8 students used AI to generate text for assignments.
And the escaped Japanese macaque from Highland Wildlife Park in Scotland has now been safely captured. The elusive monkey, which is actually named Honshu, was discovered in a local garden this morning, eating from a bird feeder.
Now, the government's launched a new campaign to encourage workers to join the early years sector by offering staff £1,000 to do so.
And this comes amid concerns about the expansion of free childcare hours that is set to begin in the next 2 months.
And let's talk to political commentator Charlie Downs, who joins us now. Good to see you, Charlie. Look, I mean, it all sounds well and good on the surface, but there's an underlying problem with funding in the childcare sector, which this isn't going to solve.
Yeah, there's a number of really sad things happening with this story, I think. Any conversation, any issue about demand, I think first and foremost has to be a conversation about immigration, frankly, because we see in so many different sectors stories basically almost every day at this point saying, you know, we need more workers, we need more, there's just so much more demand now and we can't fill it, and everything's kind of slowly grinding to a halt. And the reason for that has to be immigration. I mean, where else is the demand coming from? It's certainly not coming from the native British population. Our birth rate isn't even 2, it's 1.5. But the other sad thing that's happening here is it's the very fact that this is something that's necessary in our country, because there was a time where childcare was not even really a concept that people thought about. The sort of social fabric was such that you could leave your child with a neighbour, you could leave your child, ideally you'd leave your child with a grandparent, or even better, at home with the mother. But it's very sad to see this. And I don't think the Tories are really willing to address the root of the problem, which, as I said, I think is immigration. They're willing to, as always, try and treat symptoms by offering £1,000 to new recruits or whatever else. But ultimately, I don't think that's going to solve the problem.
I think a lot of parents watching as well might ask, do you really have to bribe people with £1,000 sort of sign-on fee? And are you going to get the right sort of people into childcare? It was a vocation. Now it's just going to be some sort of recruitment drive.
I was going to say the very same thing. This is a vocation. This is not something you get into for the money. I think those who want to do this are probably doing it. And so when you offer people that kind of cash incentive, I agree. I think you're going to attract the types of people who probably shouldn't be in that line of work in the first place. Because you have to want. It's a tough job. I mean, I'm not a dad yet, but I imagine it's one of the toughest jobs out there, looking after other people's children, let alone your own. But the other sort of sad angle of this that I've been reading about this morning is loads of parents don't actually even understand the system. I think about 17% of people just don't understand how any of it works because of the level of bureaucracy and the level of just the complexity involved. And when they call up the helpline, they get hung up on. And I think that's just another kind of microcosm of the state of our country. Excessive bureaucracy and, unhelpful services who kind of just leave you leave you out in the cold.
Well, how do we make it more affordable then? I mean, the issue seems... I mean, obviously, so many people need childcare now because, both parents very often need to work to be able to pay the bills. Childcare is very expensive. They say they can't charge parents anymore. They say they need more central funding. Is that just the path we're going to have to go down?
I don't believe so. I mean, I don't mean it to sound like a broken record, but for me, it comes down to the fact that we're bringing literally millions of people every year into our country. And, whether it's childcare or school spaces or, the space on the roads or public transport or the NHS, for goodness sake, this is an issue of demand, not of supply. Because, 50 years ago, this wasn't a problem. We have infrastructure that's designed to support maybe 50 million people. And now we have maybe as many as 80 million.
Forgive me, but 50 years ago, most women weren't working, were they?
That's quite true.
That wasn't me. Well, society has changed now.
That's quite true. But I think there's a conversation to be had there as well, is there not? I mean, I think that kind of model is actually quite desirable. And I think if you ask most people, they will agree with that.
Well, a lot of women, actually, funnily enough, would agree with that, but can't afford to. I mean, the cost of living now is so high. Frankly, the only way to make it work at all is to have at least two incomes coming into one house. And then if you want a family as well, that's when you're left in a real mess because you can't afford to do everything.
Yeah, well, I've heard author Mary Harrington say that feminism has a mother-shaped hole in it. I think that's quite right because what has women's liberation been in the final analysis, but the ability for women to become corporate drones, like the rest of us. I think it's really depressing that it is the case that everybody, both mothers and fathers have to work in order to survive. I think that's actually a damning indictment of our society. Because that's not how it should be. That's not the way it should be. It's not the way it's ever been. And now that's the way it is because we do live in this kind of managerial society where our sort of whether it's the government or the corporations just regard everybody as numbers on a spreadsheet. Everyone's essentially the same. Everyone's fungible. Everyone's just an economic unit that can be moved around. And that's the thing about the childcare providers themselves is, as we said at the beginning, anybody's going to sign up to this now because there is this cash incentive. But in the eyes of the government and the services, they're just going to, they're all the same. Functionally, they're all the same. When actually, there's going to be people who probably shouldn't be in this line of work, but who are because of the cash incentive.
It's really interesting to hear somebody as young as you saying that. May I ask how old you are, actually, just out of interest?
You may. I'm 22.
Well, there you are. I find that very interesting that somebody of your age group is actually saying, hang on a minute, the old-fashioned sort of business model of bringing up a family is no longer there and maybe we should look at it again. And it's not just about the woman or one of the partners staying at home to look after the children. It's about the fact that you used to always live near your family, your mum and dad and his mum and dad, and there was a sort of inverted pyramid or whatever you call it of help available, and people who wanted to be involved in bringing up their grandchildren or whatever. We all live away from our families now, don't we?
It's all changed.
It's quite true. I mean, I wish I was on for longer so that we could talk about this in more detail.
Well, you must come on again and we'll talk about it again. But like I said, I think it's very interesting to hear that perspective coming from somebody of your age group. Brilliant, actually.
Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Right, let's get a check on your weather this morning with Alex.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Very mild out there this morning. Quite blustery, though, particularly across the north and in western Scotland. It's a wet and windy start. The rain will continue on and off here for most of the day. A bit of drizzly rain at times over southern Scotland and northern England, mostly over the hills here and the hills and mountains of Wales, maybe a little bit damp and drizzly at times. And later on, some rain will push into Northern Ireland. Much of the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland and the far south will just stay dry and cloudy. It is quite blustery, though. Gusty winds, particularly over northeast England, southeast Scotland, along with northern Scotland. But it is very mild. Temperatures in double digits across the board, some places getting into the teens. Through this evening, the rain will ease across northwest Scotland. We'll see the rain moving through Northern Ireland and then turning up in Wales. So turning a bit damp here. Some drizzly conditions elsewhere. Again, mostly over high ground. Many places will just stay dry. And look at the temperatures overnight, staying in double digits across most of England and Wales. A little colder further north with some clearer skies here. But it stays blustery into the weekend across northern Scotland. Further showers packing in. Some rain and drizzle possible at times over southern parts of Wales and southwest England, but something a bit brighter for northern England, Northern Ireland. Some decent spells of sunshine here, although it will be quite breezy once more, although not as gusty as today. Again, very mild in the south, where temperatures could get into the teens.
All right, time for our new Great British Giveaway and your chance to win an incredible £18,000 in cash. That's £1,500 to play with each and every month for an entire year.
Just imagine what you could do with it. Here's all the details you need for a chance to make it yours.
This is your chance to win £18,000 cash in our very latest Great British Giveaway. Cash to spend on anything you like. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. What would you use that for? It could go towards your mortgage or rent, buy monthly treats, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Good luck indeed. Do stay with us. Paul Coit is going to be here with your latest sport, including the Six Nations that kick off this evening. That's next. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 6:30. Good morning to you. Paul Coit's here.
Good morning.
With all your support. Morning.
There's so much going on.
There is a lot going on.
There is a lot.
Oh. Can we talk about football last night?
Yeah, let's do that first. Now, Marcus Rashford. Now, we know about Marcus Rashford. Got himself into a bit of trouble because he had a night out and it was all over the papers. And I hate to use any sorts of sporting phrases, but he let his football do the talking last night.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, he did. He scored, didn't he?
He did. Scored a fantastic
really
goal.
brilliant goal, yeah.
It was very good, and made one as well. It was just the game of the season. So it went Wolves 3, Manchester United 4. So Rashford scores first, then they go 2-0 up. Wolves are then 3-1 down. In the 85th minute, Wolves then make it 3-2. Then, after 90 minutes, you get Pedro Neto for Wolves, makes it 3-3. So the whole of Molineux go crazy. They're thinking we've got a draw against Manchester United. And then 2 minutes later, Kobe Mainoo scores the winner for Manchester United, 97th minute.
Wow,
so
it must have been an exciting game.
It's one of these like that, and the thing is, that's when football's at its best, down to the wire.
Have you seen the front page of the Mirror? However, it's just
what are they
behind your
saying?
Computer, Stephen.
Oh, there we are.
They've done a big interview with Gaza. And it's the front page. He's saying to Rashford, don't make all the mistakes I made. Which is a bit rich, actually. He only had a night out in Ireland,
didn't he? You know what? That's it. He had a night out.
Or apparently maybe 2 nights out.
Well, maybe 2. But, you know, he's a young fella. And he's like 26 years old.
He hasn't got a reputation for doing that, has he?
No, he hasn't. And the thing is, everybody's jumped on it. And, of course, yes, it's unprofessional. Yes, he gets paid a huge amount of money. Yes, he should have been at training. But everybody makes a mistake along the way.
Yeah, he's redeemed himself now.
Yeah, and I don't think he's made himself into this terrible character where he's going to turn into Gaza or George Best just yet. I think it's early days.
Can we talk Lewis Hamilton? Because this is...
A shock?
But it's
It is a shock.
I mean, Mercedes must be furious.
Well, there's been 2 huge shocks in the past week. Jurgen Klopp leaving Liverpool, which was a week ago today, which nobody saw coming, and I mean nobody at all. And it's the same thing with Lewis Hamilton as well, leaving Mercedes and going to Ferrari. Now, I could go on for ages about how and why. I mean, to cut a very long story short, it seems to be... What's amazing, I don't know if you saw those 2 pictures, it's almost exactly the same pose, but then he's wearing something different. Everyone is just another trophy.
He did a lot of moaning about the car last year, didn't he?
He did a lot of moaning about the car, but the thing is, Ferrari also are very similar to where Mercedes are, but I think it's one of those things where he's got to 39. He's just turned 39 years old.
Has he really?
I can't believe
he was, 39, and so, but he'll be 40 when he actually drives for Ferrari, because it's not until 2025. So he's still going to drive for Mercedes this year, goes to Ferrari then for 2025 once he's 40, and it's one of those things that I think every motor racing driver going back in history always wants to drive for Ferrari. That could be one of the lures
of it. Really?
Yeah, because if you think of Ferrari, it's like if you're a footballer,
it's such a
you want
name.
to play for Real Madrid. It's what you dream of. I don't know whether there's part of that.
If you're that big a star in the F1 world, when you move, not that it can have happened quite at his level many times, do you take a team with you?
No, he will go over. There'll be team there.
So he's got to work now with a team for the rest of the year that will be really either sorry or really, angry that they're losing him.
Yeah, they will be, and it seemed that it took them by surprise, because as far as Mercedes are concerned, they're usually very organised. If there's anything that comes out, there'll be a press release, but when it happened, there was like radio silence. There was nothing until quite a while. Now, the rumours have been going around. It came out in Italy. Surprise, surprise, because obviously Ferrari, they'd got word of this. John Elkann. Now, John Elkann is the man who's the chairman of Ferrari. So he's part of the Agnelli family that own Ferrari and, well, actually, quite frankly, own Italy. I mean, they own everything. Very close friend of Lewis Hamilton. So it seems that the deal would have worked out between them. He saw that there was a gap. He had a year left on his contract, or has another year left on his contract, which is breakable, this Lewis Hamilton. So he think, well, actually, it's OK to get up this. Elkann's thinking, why don't you come to us?
Yeah.
Actually, that could work. And they're improving their car. But the bottom line, as far as he's concerned, it's not about the money. There's loads and loads of money around, but it's not about the money, it's about the winning. And he wants to win the 8th title, which he so nearly did at the end of 2022. So that's what it's about. And also racing for Ferrari. And also there's other things, his views on whether it be human rights and the way that Lewis Hamilton is a personality. Maybe Ferrari are thinking, we'd like a bit of that. That would work for us too.
Maybe.
So That's the amazing thing. It doesn't happen for another year. So he's still got to be a Mercedes guy and then get through that. Oh, what if that's uncomfortable?
It will be.
Do you reckon it's like...
He's still going to want to win. He'll want to leave Mercedes on top, though, won't he? I think it's because he's determined like that.
But he doubts that he can, I think, which is one of the reasons for the move. Anyway.
Can we have a quick look at the cricket? Is this the second test?
Yeah, we're into the second test now in India. So it's at lunch now, and I do have the latest score. Oh, by the way, Shoaib Bashir. Now, he's the young spinner, 20-year-old spinner. You remember the story? This was about a week or so ago, and he couldn't get into India because he's got... basically, his parents being born in India, but he's English, you know, he's born in Surrey. But there was problems with a visa from India to allow him to come into the country.
Right.
And from Pakistan, I beg your pardon, of course. So then to actually get into India, but now that was all sorted, so he couldn't make the first test, bowled in the second test, and he's made his debut and got his first wicket as well. So they're 103 for 2 at lunch.
Excellent. Paul, thank you very much indeed.
See you later, wasn't it?
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
Good.
It was great.
It was quality.
Yeah, very high dynamism.
I'll try my best.
It's 6:36. You're watching Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne. A quick reminder of the stories we're talking about today. The man suspected to be behind the Clapham chemical attack was reportedly twice a failed asylum seeker, and police are warning members of the public if they see him to stay away while the hunt for him continues.
Teenagers convicted of the murder of 16-year-old Brianna Ghey are set to be named as they face life behind bars.
And the government apparently is offering £1,000 to encourage people to join the childcare sector amid concerns over its rollout of free hours.
Coming up for you, don't swipe right for love. A report reveals romance fraud has increased by a fifth. We're going to talk to someone scammed out of thousands of pounds as they were looking for love. But thankfully, Paul's recovering now.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Things are better
right now.
And do stay with us, because still to come, Britain apparently is the worst in the world for acid attacks. We'll be discussing that and more in the newspapers. You're watching Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
6:39. Let's have a look at some of the newspapers for you. Start with the Daily Mail. It leads with the manhunt for Abdul Azidi, the man suspected of committing the Clapham attack, that corrosive substance attack in Clapham.
And The Guardian is leading with US ordering strikes on Iran-backed militia in revenge for the attack on their base in Jordan.
The Telegraph has the chemical attacker being an asylum seeker, well, a failed asylum seeker, turned down twice before it was actually finally granted, despite the fact he had, by that point, been convicted of a sexual attack.
The Daily Express leads with Jeremy Hunt plotting new 1p national insurance cut.
The Times has the bank chief raising hopes that rates have peaked. That's Bank of England boss, we should say.
So joining us now to go through what is in the newspapers is political commentator Andy Williams and broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon. Welcome, welcome.
Morning.
Morning.
Claire, what's the Chancellor doing? Well, because when I see that it's a 1p cut, I think, well, yeah, that's not much.
Well, yeah, exactly. So we wonder how many coffers that will bring into the Treasury. Jeremy Hunt, our esteemed Chancellor of the Exchequer, for how long? That's the other question. Is actually faced now with the fact that millions of people, 4 million people, will actually be brought into the fiscal drag, as it's being termed, which will move 4 million people into the higher rate tax of 45 pence instead of 40. And then that on top of the fact he's now saying he's not going to get rid of inheritance tax, which, to be fair, I think is fine, because it only affects 3% of the population. It's not a massive earner for the Treasury. But again, it's just all doom and gloom. But what do we expect? Where is this money coming from?
Well, no, but they've hit a real problem with this, because it was only a week ago, really, that we've been getting all these bits and bobs in the papers saying there's going to be big tax cuts in March. And now they're saying, oh, can't afford to do it. Well, that's hardly going to be a vote winner, is it?
Well, we know that the Conservatives aren't going to win, are they, really? Let's be honest about this.
You never know.
Well, you never know.
Think 1992.
Well, true, but do we think Rishi's really got it in him to win an election?
No.
I mean, I really don't think the public have got confidence in the Conservatives at the moment, and I don't think the Conservative backbenches have got confidence in the Conservative government at the moment. But that's for another day. But the facts are they're not living up to what they're supposed to be doing. Andy gave me the 5 pledges that Rishi had to try and do.
Oh, yeah.
They've not.
Stop the boats.
Stop the boats.
Half inflation.
Debt falling. Cut NHS waiting lists.
That's it. And
there's a 5th.
And inflation.
Well, inflation's down.
But, well,
1 out of 5 ain't bad.
1 out of 5, the one that he couldn't control.
Yes, that's true.
That's the point, you know? So I'm not making a party political broadcast here on behalf of any political party, because, to be honest with you, I'm politically homeless. And I think they're all a cesspit of deceit and duplicity, and notwithstanding what's happening in Scotland, of course, it's just, and all the rest of the devolved governments as well. Stormont, where is it? You know, are they sitting? Wales, look what's happened under Drakeford, and Scotland as well. The whole country is in a mess.
We're not the only ones, though.
No, we're not. It's a global problem, but we need to attack and we need to look at what's happening domestically in order for us to grow as an economy, to grow as a society, and actually help each other.
Well, maybe we need more inspirational members of Parliament. But we're not going to get them if you look at the Daily Telegraph front page, are we? Because, I mean, just MPs are being put off the job.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the story about Mike Freer, the Conservative MP, who's standing down because there, I think, was an attack on his, was it his parliamentary office?
Yeah, there was an arson attack, but of course he was also targeted by the man who killed David Amos.
Yeah. That's right, that's right. And I think it's a really, really sad reflection on the divisive nature of our politics. It's definitely got worse in the last 7-8 years, post the Brexit referendum. I don't necessarily think that was a reason, but I do think politics is more divisive even than it was 10 years ago. And we really need, as you said, Anne, we need good, inspiring, intelligent, thoughtful politicians. And why would you do it? What's the reason for you to go into politics right now if there's relentless abuse on social media, you're being physically attacked potentially, you're being abused in the street, you're not being paid lots of money, not
Oh, come on.
No, not really. Not for
80 grand or whatever they're on.
80 grand.
Staff.
80 grand is a very good salary. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, your staff doesn't come out
But
of that.
for the amount of hassle and for the level of responsibility, it's really, really not worth it. And I think we need to give politicians something. I'm not just saying it's money, but with all of these issues and problems they're having, it's a really difficult situation.
Two things on this. Was Lindsay Hoyle correct to say to the parliamentary MPs, you need to be kind to each other? Is it really the MPs that are, unkind to each other, that promotes this level of abuse to MPs? And the other thing is, stop having career politicians. I've said this many times. I think if you want to be an MP in a constituency, you ought to have lived there at least for 5 years to actually know the ground, know your constituents and know what they need economically, environmentally and everything, instead of having...
I would agree with you. I think that's...
There's a first, Stephen.
It's a first.
It's a first.
I think it's a sensible idea.
Does it feel good?
Yeah, but the point is I'm going to disagree with you because I don't think that would alter any of this.
Oh, I'm sure it would. I think if you have the passion...
It's people from... It's not necessarily your constituents who are attacking you, is it? It's just people are just being nasty. This is social media's fault. This is society's fault.
Yes, but I think if the MPs came from a better place, and I think if people could then relate to them, I think it would calm things down.
You can't say that about Joe Cox or David Amis or others. I mean, they were good.
They were great,
they
great
were good
MPs.
MPs
If there was more of them,
but they were still attacked and killed. I sort of feel the same way you do, Stephen. It seems to be such a social media thing.
I completely agree with that. I think the way that issues and controversies whipped up on social media, and you have keyboard warriors who are there abusing people, faceless, exactly. They don't think about the consequences of using really, really violent, aggressive language, and that does translate into the real world,
tonality, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, then the odd one actually does something terrible and violent physically, and it's happening more and more.
Yeah, it's a worry. Let's have a look at the eye, Claire, which says Britain is the worst in the world for corrosive attacks, which I'm really surprised at, because, I mean, obviously lots of people are saying, well, these are very rare. Not according to these figures.
Well, it's recorded figures from some police forces, so the actual number might be higher. So Britain is the worst in the world for corrosive attacks. More than 700 attacks were carried out in England and Wales in 2022. That's almost 2 a day.
Gosh.
Now, these aren't random attacks, OK? These are people who are either paid by people to attack members of their family or ex-partners. So it's not some mad idiot.
Premeditated. Yeah.
Thinking, oh, what am I going to do today? I'm going to throw a corrosive substance on someone. It's not that. And it's actually worse. People are getting paid to do this, like hitmen almost. And we need to tackle why this is happening.
Is it cultural?
I don't think it is cultural.
Is it something we've got to be brave enough to talk about? Because you say here that Britain is the worst in the world, but we're keeping a tally on it. We're keeping count on the attacks.
Thank goodness we are.
There are countries in the world where they don't keep an account on this.
Of course.
It's actually much more common.
Or might not actually be reported either. That's the other thing. So the report also found that criminals also used the liquids because it made them feel less connected to their deeds.
Yeah, well...
so it's like almost...
It also disfigures for life. Well, and isn't that one of the aims?
Horrific.
The effects of it are horrific.
I mean, look, Big Brother state and all that, I'm not a fan of. However, do we need to... this isn't your household bleach. This is stuff which is much more powerful. Do we need to be restricting sales?
Well, I think they already are. I mean, we tried to restrict sales of knives, and yet knife crime's gone, through the roof, especially in London. So I don't think restricting anything helps, but it might make the lawmakers feel better in terms of they might have, have the recipe to minimise 2 attacks a day. I think we need to look at, again, it's society, it's awful. It's corroding itself.
Heck. It's very worrying.
I don't know what you do about it.
I
mean, yes, you can restrict the particular substances,
but you can mix and make. I mean...
Yeah. But the other thing is it culturally acceptable in some cultures to go out and do that, particularly to women? The idea being to disfigure them for life. because they've fallen out with you.
Well, there is that as well, but, you know, I don't think in this country it's typically cultural, but who knows? But something, we need to look at it.
Who, Andy, is... am I being really ignorant here? Who is Xabi Alonso?
Xabi Alonso.
Oh, Xabi.
Xabi Alonso, Spanish footballer, played for Liverpool, excellent player. I'm sure Paul would tell you lots about Xabi Alonso. He's actually the favourite to be the next Liverpool manager.
Oh, is he?
Right. So he's a big cheese.
He is a big cheese.
With lots of money.
With lots of money. He's a very, very good-looking chap as well, actually.
And picture of him.
No, there he is.
Let's see him.
There he is, yeah. He's a very handsome man. And he has been the victim of a quite smart Instagram-related fraud.
Well, they've cloned his account.
That's right.
On Instagram.
And asked people for, I think it's £6.70. Please give me £6.70 a go. And you can imagine that if Xabi Alonso's asking you for that, then a few people are going to say, OK, then. Yeah.
And I imagine he has a heck of a lot of followers.
Yeah, I would have thought in the several hundred of thousands.
Why would he be asking for £6.70, though? I mean, it's such a weird amount for a start.
I know, but, I mean, people receive these messages and emails, and you see phishing emails, and 99 times out of 100, you look at it and go, well, that's... Are
you on Instagram, Andy? Did you send him £6.70?
Not on this occasion, but I might have done.
No, you wouldn't have.
No, I wouldn't have done. But as you were saying, Anne, before we came on air, you know, a handful of people will say yes, and that's going to add up, and that's why people do this, because it does. These very straightforward frauds are effective. They do work.
They do. I tell you what, if someone asks you for money, or some celebrity or whatever, out of the blue sends you a message on Instagram, ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get cloned
all
the time.
Do many people want to be Stephen Dixon?
They want to be me.
Wow.
I get cloned all the time, and thankfully get messages from people saying, have you messaged me? And some of them are asking for money. Not that I'm Xabi Alonso level of anything, but people pretend to be me and will ask you for money.
Yeah.
The Xabi Alonso of GB
me.
News, that's what they'll call you, Stephen.
Well, honestly, though, I think it's a disgrace. And there was one guy actually messaged and said, why are you pretending to be me and asking people for money? And he said...
To you?
I messaged him.
All right.
I messaged him. So why are you... I said, it's a disgrace that you're pretending...
Yeah, well, it is. You're right.
And he said, I need the money. What do you know? You've got loads of money. I need the money.
Well, it's forthright reply, isn't it? I got a text from the Royal Mail. It's obviously not the Royal Mail, because when you look at the... and it tells you to go and open links and send money so that you can receive a parcel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the actual email address is very, very... very private, yes. mendushamar731@gmail.com.
Yeah, that isn't the Royal Mail.
I don't think that's the Royal Mail.
No, I keep getting those from Every.
So I got one from Every as well, yeah.
Oh, really?
£1.45.
They're cloning, yeah. And again, it would, if they send it out to everybody they've got addresses for, it would add up, wouldn't it?
Delete.
You've got to be so careful not to click on anything, almost.
It's just those people who... And the other one, be careful of, tax refunds.
Oh, yeah.
HMRC, you're owed a tax refund. Just click here. Put your details in.
It's too good to be true.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
when
that'd be
does
nice.
that ever happen?
Exactly.
It takes about 5 years to get anything through from the tax man. Can we just have a quick look, Claire, at the Times, which says children shouldn't play rugby?
I know, and I am a rugby mother. My youngest, my youngest is turning 20 in a couple of weeks' time. He's a great rugby player. He's wonderful. He's been playing it since he was 8. What a load of tosh.
It's a form of child abuse.
That's what this new study is saying. It is absolutely ridiculous. Now, it's a very physical sport, right? So we've got, in this country at the moment, we've got issues with child development, child obesity, children not knowing how to socially interact with people, be active. Rugby is a great game for that, both for girls and boys. The camaraderie, the teamwork that goes on in all team sports, I presume.
Absolutely.
I can only speak from rugby, and we're talking about rugby here, as it's made the front page of the Times.
You've spent many a freezing cold Sunday afternoon on the line.
Mornings after a Saturday night that could have been a bit heavy, turning up. Oh, it's the worst.
Done that too.
I did it.
I've done that too, but luckily my son's turned out to be no good at it.
Well, look,
I thought, phew.
They're now saying that, I mean, as if we didn't know this, but the cultural perception is that striking a child outside sport is abuse. you can't slap your kids now, but somehow it's socially acceptable to use it in sport. What they're telling us, the high impact of sport, head injuries.
You can play rugby as long as you don't tackle.
Stephen, come on.
It's one of the worst causes of broken legs, apparently. If you go at the weekends, you go to an A&E, it's full of broken-legged rugby players.
And that's a true use of the A&E because it was an accident and it's an emergency.
Yeah.
Caused by a dangerous sport, some would say.
Anne.
No, I wouldn't, but I know that's what some people...
They know what they're letting themselves in for. And I'll tell you something else. The studies have shown, and I'm surprised this has made front page, because studies have shown that if they wear their headgear, it actually makes the injury worse because they feel protected, so they feel a bit braver. And the person attacking them thinks, well, they're protected, it'll be fine, and goes in for it. So that's really only to prevent the cauliflower ears.
Oh, yeah, you know what cauliflower is.
But it's a great sport. It really is.
And Six Nations starting tonight?
That's true. It's very in
France v Ireland.
Yeah.
Stop pretending you know what you're talking about. You've never played
You only
rugby
know
in
that,
life.
Andy, why?
I have not played rugby in my life. That's absolutely true.
There you go. Out of time. Here's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Very mild out there this morning. Quite blustery, though, particularly across the north and in western Scotland. It's a wet and windy start. The rain will continue on and off here for most of the day. A bit of drizzly rain at times over southern Scotland and northern England, mostly over the hills here, and the hills and mountains of Wales may be a little bit damp and drizzly at times. And later on, some rain will push into Northern Ireland. Much of the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland, and the far south will just stay dry and cloudy. It is quite blustery, though. Gusty winds, particularly over northeast England, southeast Scotland, along with northern Scotland, but it is very mild. Temperatures in double digits across the board, some places getting into the teens. Through this evening, the rain will ease across northwest Scotland. We'll see the rain moving through Northern Ireland and then turning up in Wales. So turning a bit damp here. Some drizzly conditions elsewhere. Again, mostly over high ground. Many places will just stay dry. And look at the temperatures overnight, staying in double digits across most of England and Wales. A little colder further north with some clearer skies here, but it stays blustery into the weekend across northern Scotland. Further showers packing in. Some rain and drizzle possible at times over southern parts of Wales and southwest England, but something a bit brighter for northern England, Northern Ireland. Some decent spells of sunshine here, although it will be quite breezy once more, although not as gusty as today. Again, very mild in the south, where temperatures could get into the teens.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel. Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock, Friday, the 2nd of February. Today, the man suspected to be behind the Clapham chemical attack was reportedly an asylum seeker, as police warn members of the public to stay away if they see him.
Teenagers convicted of 16-year-old Brianna Ghey's murder are set to be named today as they face life behind bars.
The government's offering £1,000 to encourage people to join the childcare sector amid concerns over the rollout of free hours.
And do not swipe right for love. A report reveals that romance fraud has increased by a fifth, and we're going to be speaking to someone who was scammed out of thousands of pounds.
And in sport, the football transfer window closed last night, but very quietly, to be fair. But the biggest transfer of all is Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari. More with the Formula F1 driver coming up very shortly.
It's very mild out there this morning. It's also a fairly cloudy day. Gusty for some of us, with wet weather in western Scotland. A full forecast for today and for Saturday coming up shortly.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
That romance thing, you know. I don't know what to make of it. There's loads of stuff in the papers
It's about building up trust with somebody you think might be, at last, your newfound love.
But there's loads of stuff in the papers about celebrities saying, oh, I get thrown off Tinder or whatever, the Bumble or whatever these things are called.
Oh, wasn't it Sharon Stone says she's on one of these dates?
Yeah, Sharon Stone's one of them. And there was somebody else very famous in the paper the other day, same sort of thing. Which I think encourages people to say, oh, well, I'll go on an online app. You never know who you're talking to.
No,
I know it works for some people.
Well, it does work for some people, but the point is it takes time. You're groomed over a long period of time that you might have actually found the love of your life. And then he or she sort of suddenly says, oh, I've got a bit of a money problem. Could you possibly help me out? By then you trust them and you're pinning your hopes on them.
But you've probably still never met them.
No, you may not have met them yet. In fact, I think in most of these cases you haven't.
Which means it's a con. It's a con.
Yeah, but we're all after love, aren't we? And if you think you've found it and you think how lucky you are, then you're going to trust. And it's all about just sort of pulling you into a trust situation and then asking for money.
I think we all need to be a little bit... As much as I would love to live in this lovely, sweet, innocent, flowery world, I think we all need to be a little bit more cynical, don't we? People start asking you for money. There's a problem.
Well, the alarm bells should ring, but they don't in so many cases. I suppose you get drawn in, you lend somebody £100 or something like that, and you think, and then it's a bit more the next time, and then it's a bit more the next time. By then you're in, aren't you? I don't know if you've ever been scammed like that. Let us know. But it's clearly happening a lot. We're going to be talking to someone to whom it happened. We can ask those very questions.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
And what do you think about the cash incentives, £1,000 to speed up recruitment into childcare? I can't help wondering. Lydia says cash incentives are very commonplace. I work in social care, and you see this all the time, especially with community care jobs, as these roles have the highest recruitment and retention problems. I wonder whether cash incentive isn't the right thing. Maybe cash bonus after you've proved that you're good at the job. Maybe.
They do it with teachers and things as well, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
I mean, I don't know. And Tony says, my daughter works in a nursery. They're just all on slightly above minimum wage. Meanwhile, childcare costs going through the roof. Where's all the money going? And that is a very valid question. My sister-in-law works in childcare. And so I shall have to ask her what happens. She's a manager in a nursery.
A private one or a council one?
No, a private one. But they're just about all private now, aren't they?
Yes, I think so. But I think they are very expensive to run.
Yeah, well...
There are all sorts of rules and regulations, and obviously anything to do with childcare has those rules and regulations and has got to be above par, hasn't it? You would hope. And that costs.
But I'm not so cynical about the fact that you get an incentive for joining, particularly. They're trying to get more people in. But it's just a general funding issue when people say, well, we can't charge the parents anymore because they just can't afford it. So we need a better funding model, because there is government funding anyway. But we need a better funding model.
Do you think the other problem, we were talking earlier about the fact that families they're fragmented more, they live further apart from each other, whereas in the olden days you would have relied on the grandparents a bit more, or sisters and family, like that. And we now live further apart from each other, but also maybe grandparents are younger than they were, fitter than they were, and they don't want to do all the childcare.
I think they're probably older than they were.
Yeah.
But fitter and healthier and always going on cruises.
OK.
I mean, it's that sort of thing.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, they're living life more.
Yes, exactly. So if you're a grandparent, love to hear from you. What do you think? Are you the solution to the childcare problem? Or would you say, no, I deserve my life?
It's a valid point. Anyway, let us know what you think. You know how to get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Right, to our top story now. A police manhunt for the suspect in the London chemical attack is still underway. And this, of course, comes after it was revealed that 35-year-old Abdul Azedi was convicted of a sexual offence back in 2018. And then he was refused asylum twice before then being granted leave to remain 2 years ago.
Well, the Metropolitan Police have warned us, the public, to stay away if we see him. The attacker involved on this situation in Clapham injured 12 people, including 5 police officers and 2 young children.
He was last seen on the Caledonian Road in South London, but nobody as yet knows where he is now. We're joined by former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. I mean, CCTV may play a part now in trying to find him, but also, if he is very injured, as the police have said, and it may be because of the very chemical he was using, allegedly, then he'll have to seek medical assistance, won't he, sooner or later?
Yes, one would imagine so. Although the criminal history books do have cases whereby doctors have helped fugitives who've been injured on the run, underground, far away from the gaze of the public. But I think we need to be grateful that whilst we slept comfortably in our beds last night, police officers from the Met, British Transport Police, Northumbria Police, we know all those 3 forces, were engaged in trying to find this man. That hunt will be going along at a fair old lick this morning because he's clearly very dangerous. They want him. They want to find him as soon as they possibly can, which is why they're now calling on the public for their help. There's 280 miles between London and Newcastle, or thereabouts, where he has links. So that's a lot of ground to cover. Let's just hope that that phone call is received from the police fairly soon saying, I've seen him, he went in there, here he is, come and get him.
Yeah, I mean, within all of this, it's easy to, we were saying in the last hour, it's easy to focus on the hunt for a suspect when we know who that suspect is. But, of course, what that draws attention from are the victims in all of this, with what we can only imagine are some pretty horrific injuries.
Yes, we know they're serious injuries and potentially life-changing for some of the victims. Fortunately, the Good Samaritans who came to assistance were less seriously injured, but of course thoughts will remain with those who may have very serious injuries. All the more reason that this man needs to be found, tracked down, put into handcuffs, because if he is capable of committing the offences of Wednesday night, which are the offences for which he's wanted now, of course not charged yet, then there is a possibility that other people may, I say may, be at risk. Do not approach this man if you see him. The police have made that blatantly clear. Do not approach him. Call 999.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well. The first thing I thought after the shock of hearing about it is, would I know what to do to help somebody who's had a sort of corrosive material sprayed at them? And apparently the answer is water, water, water.
Which, well, to be honest, I had the same thought. And yet these people who came out of their houses did exactly that. They did exactly the right thing.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, I think it's refreshing and uplifting to know that so many people would have put their their own concerns and fears to one side and go out onto the street and do the right thing. One younger man tried, in fact, to chase this fugitive, but he was wearing his slippers, so he wasn't as nimble or as quick as he otherwise might have been. It's great to see public spirit like that. It really is uplifting and heartwarming.
I tell you what, though, and again, we mentioned it yesterday, but amid all of this, police officers have been injured as well, because, I mean, it's obviously, even just with pouring the water on these injuries, it splashes up the corrosive stuff and all the rest of it. We forget sometimes, we take it for granted that police are just out there doing their job. They're putting themselves in harm's way with all of this.
And policing is a profession where, from time to time, sadly, you will lose your life. Police officers know that they face danger every time they rock up to work. That is, I should say, the front-line officers who are out there proactively policing. Those who push desks around for a living, sit comfortably in a leather chair, ticking boxes and fiddling with a keyboard, do not have any amount of risk attached to their lives, and I think the police need to look at that, at how many people are desk-bound rather than proactively being out there serving the public. They are often let down by their supervisors, the frontline cops. They feel unsupported on a lot of occasions. There is a huge disquiet within the police. Morale is absolutely rock bottom, and in some cases they can't recruit, and many are heading for the exit door.
And they must be so disillusioned as well, as are the general public, to learn about this man suspected of this crime. He came into Britain illegally under a lorry in something like 2018. He was then applied for asylum, was turned down, but stayed. He wasn't deported, he stayed, and then a bit later applied again and was turned down again, then went out and committed a sexual offence, was convicted of that but given a suspended sentence, and then applied for asylum again and was granted it. I mean, can you riddle that?
And based on those facts alone, this man should not even have been in the UK, let alone be in a position where he could allegedly commit extremely serious crimes and leave people very badly injured. Who's to blame here? The government, failings of the government. Border Force, failings of Border Force, the Home Office, the list goes on. This man should not have been in the UK. And if anybody wants to question the level of crime that is being committed by some asylum seekers, go onto the internet and simply search asylum seeker convicted, and you will see numerous cases of people committing the most very serious of crimes, including murder.
OK, Peter, for now, thank you. Chat to you again in just a minute. Now, teenagers convicted of murdering 16-year-old Brianna Ghey are due to be sentenced later on today.
The judge is going to release the names of the murderers. At the moment, we just know them as Girl X and Boy Y, arguing there was a strong public interest in lifting their anonymity.
Well, Mrs Justice Yip said people will want to know their identities to understand how such a heinous act was committed.
GB News reporter Sophie Reaper tells us more.
A deadly influence on one another. Words used to describe the two youths responsible for the murder of transgender teenager Brianna Ghey. In February of last year, the then 15-year-olds known as Girl X and Boy Y carefully plotted and executed their plan to kill, luring their victim to Culcheth Linear Park in Warrington under the pretence of taking drugs. There, Brianna would be stabbed 28 times with a hunting knife and then left to die. In their trial at Manchester Crown Court, the two teenagers turned against one another, each blaming the other for Brianna's death. But in the end, the jury found them both guilty of murder. Both of Brianna's parents were present throughout the trial, and after hearing the guilty verdicts, her father spoke out about the impact the death of his daughter had on him.
I wish I had been there to protect her, but that's something I must live with. The suffering from this horrific incident should never happen, and I hope no other family ever experience the torture this can bring.
Brianna's mother also gave a statement asking for people to show kindness to the families of her daughter's murderers.
Please have some empathy and compassion for the families of the young people convicted of this horrific crime. They too have lost a child, and they must live the rest of their lives knowing what their child has done.
Now, both girl X and boy Y face life sentences for their brutal murder of Brianna Ghey. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Peter Blexley's still with us. Is it right, Peter, that two people who were, I think they were 15 at the time of the murder, should have their names released?
Yes, it's just about a year coming up to the year's anniversary of Brianna's brutal and utterly avoidable murder. These two young people had murderous intent, and sadly, they carried that out. They had drawn up a list of other potential victims. Killing was what they were going to do. And Mrs. Justice Yip, the judge in this case, is absolutely spot on when she says in the public interest these two young people need to be named. They will both turn 18 next year in any event, so any anonymity order would probably have been lifted at that stage. So yes, the public deserve to know just who these lying, murderous people are.
I suppose they would be in a juvenile facility until 18, but at 18 they'd go into an adult prison, wouldn't they?
Well, sometimes it's until 21 that somebody can be detained in a youth offenders institution, but that depends on a number of factors, including the circumstances of the crime and, of course, any threat or danger that the person convicted might pose.
Now, you see, the victim's mother there showed compassion towards the parents of the perpetrators, the murderers, but naming those two youngsters, I don't like calling them youngsters, actually, naming those two murderers will actually throw a spotlight on their families. Is that fair, or is it right that we as a society should question the way they were brought up, frankly?
Well, they were convicted of Brianna's murder last year, so there has been some time in which anybody family member who's going to be named and therefore could be linked could have taken down their online profiles, could have had themselves removed from any voters' registers and the such like. So this is not something that has been sprung upon them. I do, of course, commend Brianna's mother for asking people to show empathy and compassion to the families of these murderers. I wonder if I would have been able to do that had I been in that circumstances. So it's truly a remarkable thing to do. But yes, the public interest is the overwhelming factor here, and consequently, they will correctly, rightly be named.
OK, Peter, thank you. Now, the government's launched a new campaign to encourage workers to join the early years sector by offering people £1,000 to sign on the dotted line.
And this, of course, comes amid concerns about the expansion of free childcare hours that is apparently going to begin in the next 2 months.
Well, let's talk to journalist and former Labour advisor Mike Buckley, who joins us now. Mike, good to see you this morning.
Morning.
There's a lot of concerns about childcare, the levels of childcare available, the cost of childcare in the UK. Is any of this going to make any difference?
I mean, the policy isn't a bad one, and this government, of course, has completely failed on early years education and childcare, throughout its tenure. Though last year, Jeremy Hunt did announce this policy where parents of over twos are going to get 33 hours of free childcare from April this year. And I think all other parents of children or other children over 9 months are going to get free childcare from September 2025, I think, which is a great policy to have. Unfortunately, it only works if you've got the staff in place. And if those staff are going to be paid a reasonable amount, so they're going to stay in post. What the government's doing now is launching a campaign to get more people to join the profession, because there simply aren't enough workers at present, and childcare companies and nurseries just say, well, we don't have the capacity to give these places to children because we just don't have the staff to cover it. But of course, it's far too little, far too late. And childcare providers have been saying overnight since this policy was announced, this is far too little, far too late, to drop in the ocean. And also, the money just isn't there. Staff are paid about the minimum wage, the living wage. And this £1,000, I mean, it sounds nice, but in the end, it's not going to go very far, given bills being where they are. I mean, there was one fairly senior person who runs a nursery, and she was saying, I could make more money stacking shelves in Tesco. And a lot of people would seek to make that choice because it's far less responsibility. She, of course, is choosing to do something different. So this is the government very belatedly trying to fix the problem of its own making.
And it's been announced by the government that it's going to happen. Obviously, it's going to happen in an election year. But when you think of that, will it become an election issue at all? Because what could Labour promise? As you say, there's just no money.
This will become a problem because in April, of course, this is piloted, and from September, this is meant to be open to all parents of 2-year-olds. So if it doesn't work, that's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of people who are going to be affected across the country. We're thinking, I should be getting some free childcare places. I can't. This tells me that the government is unprepared and incompetent and unwilling to fund this project that they've announced. In terms of the money, I mean, we'll find out when the OBR makes its predictions, when we get to Jeremy Hunt's budget at the beginning of March. But all the smoke signals coming out of the government have been saying, we want to use any money that's available for tax cuts, because they think that's going to be a sweetener before the election. But if you're a parent of a small child thinking, well, couldn't that money be used to pay for childcare? You're not going to be very happy that it's been used to give out money, in free tax cuts, which clearly the country cannot afford. When you look at the state of the education system, the NHS, the judicial system, and this, much as the tax rate is too high, I would agree with that. Right now, we just simply don't have the money for tax cuts because there are other priorities.
OK, Mike, good to get your perspective on that. Thanks very much indeed. Let's see what the weather's doing wherever you are in the UK. Here's Alex.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Very mild out there this morning. Quite blustery, though, particularly across the north and in western Scotland. It's a wet and windy start. The rain will continue on and off here for most of the day. A bit of drizzly rain at times over southern Scotland and northern England, mostly over the hills here, and the hills and mountains of Wales may be a little bit damp and drizzly at times. And later on, some rain will push into Northern Ireland. Much of the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland, and the far south will just stay dry and cloudy. It is quite blustery, though. Gusty winds, particularly over northeast England, southeast Scotland, along with northern Scotland, but it is very mild. Temperatures in double digits across the board, some places getting into the teens. Through this evening, the rain will ease across northwest Scotland. We'll see the rain moving through Northern Ireland and then turning up in Wales. So turning a bit damp here. Some drizzly conditions elsewhere. Again, mostly over high ground. Many places will just stay dry. And look at the temperatures overnight, staying in double digits across most of England and Wales. A little colder further north with some clearer skies here, but it stays blustery into the weekend across northern Scotland. Further showers packing in. Some rain and drizzle possible at times over southern parts of Wales and southwest England, but something a bit brighter for northern England, Northern Ireland. Some decent spells of sunshine here, although it will be quite breezy once more, although not as gusty as today. Again, very mild in the south, where temperatures could get into the teens.
Right, at 7:22, it's time for the Great British Giveaway. And you really could be our next big winner with an incredible £18,000 in cash from us, just because we love you. Fancy a chance to win it? Here are all the details you need to enter.
This is your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash. That's like having an extra £1,500 each month for the next year. And if you're thinking, I'd never win something like that, listen to the moment we told Phil from West Yorkshire he'd won our last Great British Giveaway.
Phil, I've got some really good news for you. You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
You're joking. That's brilliant news.
For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Now, are you looking for love, but are you worried about getting scammed? Well, we're going to be talking to someone who knows, sadly, all about that. That's coming up next here on Breakfast.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
7:27 morning to you. Now, in this modern digital world, online dating is becoming the norm for many people. But a report by Lloyds Bank has revealed that romance scams have increased by a fifth compared to 2022.
It's a really cynical thing to happen, isn't it? But according to the data, criminals target their victims by, of course, using fake photos, and then they avoid meeting their victims in person, and sometimes they can extort thousands of pounds.
Well, let's talk to someone who knows only too well how this can damage your life. A romance scam victim, Lynn Hawes. Lynn, good to see you this morning. What happened?
Hiya. Good morning.
Morning.
I met someone online, but I actually met the person in question. So it was a completely different sort of thing. Never give money to people that you've never met. Well, I actually met the person over a period of 2 years. Got involved with the so-called family, friends. Yeah, and he was fake. He was real, but he was fake. Everything about him was fake, his name. Yeah.
But you really thought you'd met the love of your life at last?
Yeah, definitely. He made me feel like no one's ever felt before. Yeah, honestly.
What worries me is how considered this all seems to be. Because you say you met friends and you met family. Were all these people in on it?
Yeah, there was quite a few. There was at least 10 people I met, all part of the fraud.
How did he start asking you for money? What did he say at first that he needed money for?
Well, no, he didn't. I offered money because I was put in a situation. It's such a long story. I was put in a situation where I thought I'd lost something valuable, and I offered him the money. So it was me. About 8 months into it, we were in Dubai, and I offered him the money because I thought I'd lost something.
How much money did you end up? How much money did you end up giving him?
About 100,000 in all.
100,000 pounds.
Yeah, I know.
And then at what stage did you realise that it had been a scam?
Well, the police come to me and said, someone's wrong us, we think you've been scammed. And I said, no. He said, well, if you message him now and tell him the police are here. I said, that's it, you won't hear from him again. So I did, and he just said, well, we're just doing the job, don't worry about it. So I was like to the police, well, look, he hasn't disappeared. So I totally didn't believe it. And then a few days down the line, I get a phone call from him. He said he was in Jerusalem, and it come up United Kingdom. So I suppose for a long time I actually thought, I don't know what I was thinking. I was groomed in such a way I can't even explain it. The manipulation that was going on was these people were a gang. They were very good at what they did, very good. And I rang the police after I got that phone call. I said, look, I think I am being scammed. So I went to the police.
Did you manage to get any money back?
No. But I set this thing up with the police, and I got them 4 years. So, yeah.
Right, well, that's something.
I mean, the money's important, obviously, but it's also, you must have been absolutely broken-hearted.
It is actually the mental side. You just wouldn't believe it. I was absolutely devastated to be lied to for such a long period and to break down so many people. It was just horrible. At the time I thought, the money, it is important, but my mental state, I would rather see justice be done. So I carried on talking to him for about 4 months, as if everything was normal. I went to the police. And we set him up, and he got 4 years. So.
Well done you.
Yeah, Lynn, sorry about what's happened to you, but we appreciate you talking to us. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah, let it serve as a warning to anyone else.
Oh, grim. Now, look, we've been talking about the childcare sector and how to get more people working in that sector. And the idea is from the government to dangle £1,000 in front of them to sign on the dotted line. Was that going to work? Let's talk to Education Minister David Johnston. Good to see you this morning. Look, a lot of people saying, in the great scheme of things, it sort of sounds nice on paper, but is this really going to work?
Well, this government is making the single largest investment that's ever been made in childcare. And the reason we're doing that is because it's one of the biggest cost pressures facing working families today. And when we're finished, this is going to save families up to £6,500 on the cost of childcare. What today's programme is all about, our big new recruitment campaign, the financial incentives that you mentioned, is about encouraging more people to consider working in this sector. We don't need many more people for April. We feel confident we've got the number of staff on that. We saw an increase of 13,000 people join last year. But what we want to do is make sure in this doubling of investment we've got enough people for this September and the following September, when parents will be able to claim 30 hours of free childcare every week from when their child is 9 months old until they start school.
But bribing potential recruits with £1,000 may result in you getting the wrong sort of recruit. Are you not worried about that?
Well, what we've seen in areas like schools is that where you have a shortage of, say, maths teachers or science teachers, offering a financial incentive like this can make the difference to encouraging people into this sector. Now, the biggest reason people should think about this sector is that when children are between 0 and 5 years old, a huge proportion of their brain development happens, up to 80% of their brain development, and that has a big role on what happens to them as children, young people, and then as adults. And so the biggest reason for people to look at this sector is the huge difference they can make to children at the earliest stage. But what we're doing today is testing, if you offer that £1,000 in the 20 areas that we are, does it further increase the number of people that you have applied to join it?
What about the salary, though? If people do join up, yeah, the £1,000 bonus, as it were. But, I mean, so many people getting in touch with us this morning saying, look, they're on minimum wage or living wage, and actually it's a job where people are really struggling.
Well, what we've done over a number of years now as part of this investment is increase the amount of money that we give to people working in early years, and alongside that made significant increases to the national living wage. So, you know, the Chancellor just last year announced a near 10% increase in the national living wage. And then what we did was give more money to early years, nurseries and so on, in order that they would be able to boost the wages of their staff. So we are seeing growth in the wages of people in this sector. We're seeing more people join the sector, more places being created. But ultimately, this is about giving working families the support that they need. And we want their children to get good early years education, and we want them as parents to be able to return to work if that's, you know, if they're not in work at the moment, to be able to increase their hours. And these two things are really core to what we're doing with our childcare expansion.
I know on the government website, talking about this, Gillian Keegan is quoted as saying no one should have to choose between having a career and having a family. I know there are probably a lot of people watching us right at the moment who say you shouldn't have a family if you can't afford it, and it's not for the state to keep your kids.
Well, when I knock on doors in my own constituency, which I do pretty much every week, the vast majority of parents are saying to me that what would really help them is to have support with childcare. But this is the latest in a series of expansions that we've made to childcare. We can, if we want to, get into the fact that the Labour Party have absolutely no plan for this area whatsoever. You might, in a minute, want to ask me about that. But I think that this has been really popular with parents so far. And we opened on the 2nd of January. We've already seen over 102,000 parents claim this new offer, which is really strong demand. And it shows that this is something that people out there really want, and that's going to make a huge difference to their family finances.
Well, we can't give you that open goal to have a go at Labour, sadly, Minister, because we're out of time. But
there'll be plenty more opportunities.
There will be.
Next time.
Next time. Good to see you this morning. Thank you. In the meantime, we've got to get ourselves into gear with the sport, Paul Coyte.
I see what you're doing. Open goal, into gear. It's all working. It all threads together very well.
Oh, it does. It does. Can we talk F1?
Well, actually, we can, because the transfer window closed as far as football was concerned last night, and not a lot of big deals gone on. But the irony is that it's not actually football the biggest transfer. It's actually Formula One, as you mentioned. Now, Lewis Hamilton has moved then from Mercedes or going to Ferrari. It's not this year. It actually happens in 2025. An F1 driver, the original Stig from Top Gear we've got, that's Perry McCarthy. Morning, Perry.
Good morning.
I'd talk about transfers. How much of a surprise was this one for you?
The only bigger surprise is if they sign me.
Well, you never know.
I'm here. It's been a really big shock, because it was only a little while back that Lewis signed a 2-year deal to stay with Mercedes for the forthcoming future. But that's given the thing about Lewis's success and his power in the sport. He was able to insert into his own contract, there was a get-out clause after 1 year, and he's triggered that in a shock move to sign for Ferrari, as you know.
So what's the reason, do you think? I mean, I had some theories, we were speaking earlier, about the fact that it is Ferrari. You don't say no to Ferrari. It's something you always want to do in your career. Is it a chance that he will stand more of a chance of winning that 8th title with them? What's your theory on this?
that Mercedes might be in a good position to challenge Red Bull this year. The biggest problem, as you know, is that for the last 2 years, Mercedes really haven't had the car to challenge for the World Championship. I mean, notwithstanding that, it's the most successful driver-team pairing ever, because Lewis has been with Merck for 11 years now, and he won 6 of his world titles with them. So it's been very, very good. But racing drivers are racing drivers, and he's looking to say, what is the future? Exactly as you just alluded to. Is he thinking, can Mercedes do it? It's the same question about Ferrari, though. Could Ferrari usurp Red Bull in the near future? So if you're going to take a balance and a guess, why not change? I mean, there's one thing I can guarantee, is that it's going to put a spring in his step. You know, this change, finally driving for Ferrari. He's 39 now. He's still brilliant. And that just shows how much he's valued in Formula One, because Mercedes were desperate to keep him, and Ferrari have been desperate and successfully now signed him.
Perry, in sport, though, everybody has a shelf life when it comes to age. You say he's 39, he'll be 40 by the time he drives for Ferrari. Is that too old? Is there a point where it starts to go? What is it that goes? Is it fitness? Is it senses? And how long do you reckon he's got?
I don't think it's fitness at all. You have to be quite strong to drive a Formula One car because of all the forces. The number one thing you need in Formula One, and I suggest this is true of absolutely any sport, it's no good being talented, it's no good being brilliant. You need that. You've got to want it. You've absolutely got to want it, that motivation. And it absolutely appears that Lewis has still got every ounce of that. Because if we see another brilliant racing driver who's 2 years older than him, I think, Fernando Alonso, Fernando's still an absolute tiger fighting at the front of the field. So I think we can certainly expect the same from Lewis. But you know, the driving factor here is that 2 years ago, I think it's generally felt he was robbed of his 8th World Championship. And I guarantee you he'll still be smarting from that one. He wants to put the record straight.
Nothing to do with the money, then. That's not even come into it.
Money's a value thing in this. Is that, you know, you get to a point, in Lewis's case anyway, where certainly you're probably covered for the future, you know? So that's just a value thing to just say, I've signed for this. It's not, I'll guarantee, I'm not inside his head, but I'll guarantee it's not money driven. They'll be paying
really
a
good
lot.
to speak to you. It makes a lot of sense. Thanks very much for your time. Perry McCarthy, the original Stig, knows what it's like driving F1. It ain't about the money, it's all about the glory.
It must be lovely to have so much money that signing a multi-million-pound contract means nothing.
Well, if that was the case, you think he'd go, I'll go to Ferrari, I don't want anything for it, I'm quite happy to do it for nothing.
Yeah, well, no. Paul, thank you. We'll see you a little bit later on.
Rugby next, thanks.
Do stay with us at 7:41. We're going to be going through the newspapers soon, and we'll learn why a vegan restaurateur has been roasted after adding meat and dairy to his menu or her menu. That's all coming up. Shock horror. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:45, let's see what's in the papers today with political commentator Andy Williams and the broadcaster Claire Muldoon. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Let's start, Andy, with Labour. This has been... I don't know why the Guardian's picked up on this now, but this, they're saying Labour's planning on ditching their flagship policy to spend £28 billion on green investments. This was around in the Times a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so Labour have been in a mess over the last week. This has grown and grown and grown. They obviously committed to spending £28 billion a year on green investment, and over time they've been slowly but surely rowing back on that pledge because Rachel Reeves is saying we can't afford it. And now, finally and fully, they are ditching the pledge. They're saying it's more of an aspiration than...
But that was their whole plan for growth, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I have to say, personally, I think they should be doubling down on this. I think they should be saying, we need, after years and years of anemic growth and an economy that's sluggish, we need a proper plan, a proper industrial strategy, and the future is in the green transition. I think they should be going for it. The reality is, Labour, and I'm not afraid of saying this anymore, they are going to win the general election. They're probably going to win it by a country mile. Be a bit bold. I'd like to see just a bit more
Or be a bit
ambition.
scared.
Does this not smack, though, of not being able to reach the duplicitous, in my view, net zero targets of 2050 or something?
Depends who you ask.
Ridiculous.
Depends who you
I mean,
ask.
it's just shocking that they're even having this discussion. People are dying in the streets. We've got a completely disparate community and disparate country at the moment, and all they can bang on about is the green agenda. Bin it. Recycle it. Move on.
Well, I would disagree with you on that. If this plan, if you look at how they originally outlined it, then let's invest in the green economy, and that will grow the economy. So that would benefit everybody. So if that was to work, great. But if it's all being... It's the fact that...
Does that not make you think it's not going to work, and that's why they're ditching it?
Maybe. I don't agree. I do think this is about creating jobs. It's about creating a whole new sector of the economy. And I think it's absolutely the way forward in terms of generating...
So why aren't they doing it? Why aren't they doing it?
Because two reasons. Firstly, because they're scared that the Tories, that the government are going to say Labour are reckless, because the constant narrative is Labour crashed the economy, which is a bit rich coming from this government, by the way, after the catastrophe of Liz Truss and the total failure.
You can't blame Liz Truss for that. She was only in government for as long as a lettuce lived, for heaven's sake. Come on, Andy, why have they ditched it? So that was the first point you made. Why did they ditch it? What's
They've
the
ditched
second
it
reason?
because they're under pressure. Every time they commit to spending any money, the government are saying, how are you going to pay for this?
Well, that's not an unreasonable question.
Absolutely, but the answer is you have to invest to grow. And
yeah, but why can't they say that if they believe it?
Well, I think they should. I think they should be, and I think it's a mistake.
Well, they can't.
Well, they obviously they can't. The money would have gone in investing in green infrastructure, including the creation of GB Energy. Is that an affiliation of GB News?
No, it's not. No.
Too much hot air from GB News
No.
will fuel the economy.
Absolutely. Do you want to have a comeback?
Claire,
that was quite a good comeback.
Move us on, Claire, to the state of our children's teeth.
Now, we were talking in the last segment about rugby and how that could be instigated as like a form of child abuse. This, to me, is a right abdication of parental responsibility. The statistic is harrowing. 1 in 6 children leaving year 6, which is in England and Wales, the top of end of primary school before you go on to high school. 1 in 6 are leaving with abject tooth decay. Now, there are dentists. NHS dental work is free for children under the age of 18. If you can't find a dentist as a parent, you aren't looking hard enough. Go and find one. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, but 20, 30 years ago, when I was bringing up my boys, you didn't expect them to need much dental work because you stood over them every morning and every evening and made them brush their teeth.
I wasn't stood over. I'm like 52, so I mean, when I have, and I don't have any problems with my teeth. Right, my parents certainly didn't stand over me and you have to do this, you have to do that. It's part of you. It's part of your makeup. It's part of taking care of yourself.
You usually learn it from your parents.
Well, not schools. You know, don't forget Labour want to bring in toothbrushing exercises after breakfast club before you sit down and do your work.
It's a parent's job, surely.
Absolutely it is. And the fact that this statistic is so high, I blame it squarely and absolutely at the foot of parents. It's bad parenting.
Yeah,
me too.
We all agreed on that.
How did we get to this situation where we have brought up a generation of bad parents?
Well,
yes,
and how do we reverse it?
It's our fault in a way. It's like how people can't cook anymore. It's because they've not been taught.
Well, you can say that, but we've never had so much cookery on TV as we've got at the moment.
Yeah, but we watch it instead of do it.
And cookery books. But people will be engaged. You know, it's too quick, too easy to get a Deliveroo. It's too quick, too easy to go out somewhere else. You know, if people actually worked as hard at home, bringing up children, bringing up a home, making a home, then the country would be in a much better place.
Yeah.
You agreed again?
The world's gone mad. I'm agreeing with Claire Muldoon.
Actually, talking of going out to eat, this Macclesfield vegan restaurant's in trouble.
Yes, because in order to stay open, this restaurateur has said we're going to have to start serving meat.
Can you believe that?
I mean,
They're USP.
So I think there are two really interesting things about this. The first is he is saying that fanatics, quote unquote, are punishing him with 1-star reviews online for sort of rowing back on his commitment to veganism, which is that it says something really interesting about the kind of the culture of the way we. You know, the way we talk about food and focus on particular things like that. But also, actually, hospitality is in a really, really difficult place because of inflation. You know, prices have gone up and up and up, and it's very, very difficult for pubs and for restaurants to make any money. And it's really it's a great place to closing.
It probably is if you are a specialist restaurant. Well, plenty of places are full. If they do a full range of things. If you're doing a specialist vegan menu, you know, you're restricting your customer base.
And that's what this guy has said. He said, you know what, actually, we can't make money if he says, when my business is 100% vegan, I'm only targeting 5% of the market, and a lot of my customers are asking for meat, so understandable to stay. A lot
of the major food manufacturers are actually ditching their vegan ranges now because the market just isn't there. The taste for it, for want of a better word, no pun intended, just isn't there. But I find it completely ironic ironic that, especially with Gen Zers, and you've heard me say this before, but I define a Gen Z between pre-oat milk and post-oat milk. And their idea of hell, of Dante's Fifth, is opening the fridge. No oat milk in the fridge. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So the irony is the fact that this vegan restaurant has to be inclusive, has to be diverse. Where's the irony? Come on, that was supposed to be the complete diversity in veganism as an alternative to meat.
Claire, I have to put my hands up. I'm an oat milk devotee.
Do you know what, Andy?
And it's not for ethical reasons. It's because I actually really like it. Genuinely in my coffee.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Oh,
catty.
I don't know what that means, Claire.
It's catty.
But
I agree with you, Claire, again. I mean, the world's gone mad. OK, thank you both. We'll see you a little bit later on. Let's get a check on the weather. Wherever you are in the UK, is Alex Deakin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Very mild out there this morning. Quite blustery, though, particularly across the north and in western Scotland. It's a wet and windy start. The rain will continue on and off here for most of the day. A bit of drizzly rain at times over southern Scotland and northern England, mostly over the hills here and the hills and mountains of Wales. Maybe a little bit damp and drizzly at times. And later on, some rain will push into Northern Ireland. Much of the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland and the far south will just stay dry and cloudy. It is quite blustery, though. Gusty winds, particularly over northeast England, southeast Scotland, along with northern Scotland. But it is very mild. Temperatures in double digits across the board, some places getting into the teens. Through this evening, the rain will ease across northwest Scotland. We'll see the rain moving through Northern Ireland and then turning up in Wales. So turning a bit damp here. Some drizzly conditions elsewhere. Again, mostly over high ground. Many places will just stay dry. And look at the temperatures overnight, staying in double digits across most of England and Wales. A little colder further north with some clearer skies here. But it stays blustery into the weekend across northern Scotland. Further showers packing in. Some rain and drizzle possible at times over southern parts of Wales and southwest England, but something a bit brighter for northern England, Northern Ireland. Some decent spells of sunshine here, although it will be quite breezy once more, although not as gusty as today. Again, very mild in the south, where temperatures could get into the teens.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. 8 o'clock, Friday the 2nd of February. Today, the man suspected to be behind the Clapham chemical attack was reportedly an asylum seeker, as police warn members of the public to stay away from him whilst the hunt continues.
Teenagers convicted of 16-year-old Brianna Ghey's murder are set to be named today as they face life behind bars.
The government is offering £1,000 to encourage people to join the childcare sector amid concerns over the rollout of free hours. We spoke to the Education Minister, David Johnston, earlier on.
Today is testing. If you offer that £1,000 in the 20 areas that we are, does it further increase the number of people that you have applied to join it?
And beware of swiping right for love. A report reveals that romance fraud has increased by a fifth. We were hearing earlier somebody who's been scammed out of thousands of pounds.
So much sport going on. Rugby Six Nations is back tonight, France versus Ireland. Former England hooker George Shooter will be with us.
It's very mild out there this morning. It's also a fairly cloudy day. Gusty for some of us with wet weather in western Scotland. A full forecast for today and for Saturday coming up shortly.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News. My goodness, the debate on childcare has really got you going. Because obviously the government promising £1,000 to would-be recruits into the childcare business. Will that work? And then we were asking, you know, we're different nowadays. Our grandparents aren't around us anymore. They're off doing cruises and things like that. Well, Paul and Trudy in Staffordshire got in touch, morning, said as grandparents of 7 grandchildren... 7? We are also victims of the cost of living. Both of us hold down full-time jobs to pay our bills. We do help when we can, but times have changed quite dramatically.
Yeah, Christine says, I live away from my grandchildren. I would love to help, but I have to work, even if they lived closer.
Yeah, Elle makes the same point. Many grandparents are still working. Not everybody is on cruises or at the gym doing their keep fit thing. My stepdaughter works in the childcare sector. Many of the workers there are on minimum wage. She's a manager and is herself basically on a minimum wage, especially when you look at the hours she works.
Yeah, Tam is in Sale. Oh, I love Sale.
Sale in Staffordshire, isn't it?
Great, well, it's like Greater Manchester. It might be Staffordshire. Might be classed as Staffordshire. I don't know. Anyway, but anyway, he says, I'm a grandparent and I looked after the little ones when they were younger, but I've found that because of the cost of living, I've had to go back to work. I don't think it's a case of grandparents wanting to live life to the full. It's a case that most of us are just needing to have a job.
Yeah.
Though, if you want to live life to the full, if you can afford to do it, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Helen says the older generation don't always have good pensions. I have to work full-time till I'm 67, so I can't help children and childcare. It's really sad, but unfortunately that is fact.
And talking about the free childcare hours and things, all the Sydney's been in touch and said, I would prefer it if you would say taxpayer-funded rather than government-funded. Well, I think that's a very valid point, actually,
Yeah,
Sydney.
sometimes that point needs to be made.
Yeah, maybe if people lived modestly and with less greed, they could afford childcare, and if you can't afford them, don't do it.
Difficult, though, isn't it? Janice says, I'm the solution to my family's childcare needs. I'm a 65-year-old grandmother of 8, between 2 and 12. I look after them all in various combinations, 5 days a week. I've saved my 4 daughters a fortune in childcare costs. For me, it means I have a lovely relationship with them all. The downside is that they bring all the coughs and colds and other germs home to me.
Yeah. I'll tell you
you work hard.
Well, you do, but that's the thing. That's a full-time job.
Yeah, it is.
Mind you,
It
it's
is.
60...
And exhausting.
But at 65... That's what I was struck by with that. 65. Back in the day, we would have 65. Oh, you know, elderly lady at 65. Well, technically, you should still be working.
Yeah,
you?
back in the day, at 65, you were sitting in a corner with white hair doing some knitting, weren't you? And things have changed dramatically.
You don't get to do that till you're 92 now.
No? I look forward to that.
well,
Sitting in a corner and doing some knitting.
Yeah, there you go. But looking after 8, 5 days a week, full-time job.
That is a very big job. Well done. Well done, everybody.
Keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, a police manhunt for the suspect in the London chemical attacks is underway. It comes after reports revealed that the suspect, 35-year-old Abdul Azidi, was convicted of a sexual offence in 2018. Sources also say he was refused asylum twice before, after the sexual offence, being granted leave to remain for over 2 years ago.
Yeah, and then he was given asylum, wasn't he? The Met Police have warned the public to stay away if they see him because he injured 12 people so badly, including 5 police officers and, of course, 2 young children.
Well, he was last seen in South London on the Caledonian Road, so that search continues.
And, of course, at the moment, we still don't know where he is. Let's talk now to the host of Protect and Serve podcast and former police officer, Oliver Lawrence. Good to see you, Oliver. What's your reaction to this catalogue of, reasons that he should never have been on the street in the first place?
Yeah, good morning, Anne. Good morning, Stephen. Doesn't it just demonstrate how broken the vetting system is in our asylum seeker and refugee program in terms of we're just allowing these individuals to slip through the net? They're coming here on the back of a lorry, as did this individual in 2016, committed a heinous crime, received a suspended sentence, and then approaches a priest who's able to validate that he's converted to Christianity. And only a matter of years later, he's committing another very serious and heinous crime. If this doesn't show us how broken the system is, I'm not too sure what will. It's incredibly distressing to think that he's still on the run. But if there's anything good the Met are at, it's at catching individuals. And I have no doubt when you look at his most recent photo that he'll be in custody very shortly with any luck.
Yeah, this is... obviously, he's just alleged to have carried out this attack. We need to be very clear on that. But, however, the attack itself is absolutely horrific. It beggars belief that stuff like this is still going on the streets of the United Kingdom.
It is a real and serious problem, and it's one that we're grappling with in terms of the violence that we're seeing against women and girls across this country. And it's just another example of that. And it's absolutely terrifying. I can't imagine what the families are going through in terms of what they were subjected to, as you quite rightly say, allegedly by this individual who's now on the run. And yes, I agree, there's got to be better education, better programs in ensuring that people understand the significance of these and the impact it has on victims. But it's something that needs to be addressed across this country and incredibly worrying. There's no doubt about that.
Now, police have told us that so far this man that they're looking for has a very bad injury to the side of his face. And in the most recent CCTV image we've seen, it really does look as though he's very badly injured. One can only say, hopefully, by his own corrosive substance or whatever it was. And it's interesting that that photo was also taken of him after buying a bottle of water. It may well be that he felt he needed the water on his burn. But sooner or later they'll catch him, surely, because he'll have to go for some sort of medical assistance, won't he?
Yeah, like we've commented on other cases in the past. If you remember back to Daniel Cleaver, who escaped from Wandsworth Prison, there was, these cases where people eventually need to seek shelter, they need to seek finance, they need to seek support. And in this particular case, medical treatment to what is and what looks to be an incredibly significant injury. But as you quite rightly say, Anne, the police will be looking and scouring CCTV footage and following footsteps. And as the police have quite rightly said, this is allegedly a very dangerous individual that people shouldn't approach. And obviously, if he's cited, to dial 999 immediately. But like everybody else, I'm very confident in the coming hours we'll see some significant developments from the Metropolitan Police, who will be working with partners to try and identify geographically where this individual is, so they can bring him into custody very, very quickly.
Well, let's hope so, and then they can investigate whether there is, in fact, a case to answer there. We're going to talk to you back in just a second, so don't go anywhere, because we're going to be talking now about the two teenagers convicted of murdering 16-year-old Brianna Ghey, are due to be sentenced later on today.
The judge is apparently going to release the names of the murderers. At the moment, we only know them as Girl X and Boy Y, but we will know their names later today, apparently because, according to the judge, there is strong public interest in lifting their anonymity.
Yeah, the judge, Mrs Justice Yip, said people will want to know their identities to understand how such a heinous act was committed.
GB News reporter Sophie Reaper will tell you more.
A deadly influence on one another. Words used to describe the two youths responsible for the murder of transgender teenager Brianna Ghey. In February of last year, the then 15-year-olds known as Girl X and Boy Y carefully plotted and executed their plan to kill, luring their victim to Culcheth Linear Park in Warrington under the pretence of taking drugs. There, Brianna would be stabbed 28 times with a hunting knife and then left to die. In their trial at Manchester Crown Court, the two teenagers turned against one another, each blaming the other for Brianna's death. But in the end, the jury found them both guilty of murder. Both of Brianna's parents were present throughout the trial, and after hearing the guilty verdicts, her father spoke out about the impact the death of his daughter had on him.
I wish I had been there to protect her, but that's something I must live with. The suffering from this horrific incident should never happen, and I hope no other family ever experience the torture this can bring.
Brianna's mother also gave a statement asking for people to show kindness to the families of her daughter's murderers.
Please have some empathy and compassion for the families of the young people convicted of this horrific crime. They too have lost a child, and they must live the rest of their lives knowing what their child has done.
Now, both Girl X and Boy Y face life sentences for their brutal murder of Brianna Ghey. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Well, let's return to former police officer Oliver Lawrence. Do you think there is a need, a public need for us to know the identity of these two young people on the basis that they were just 15, apparently, when this crime was committed?
Yeah, it's a good question, Stephen. I think, as the judge pointed out, these are exceptional circumstances. These two youngsters are fast approaching 18. And I think there is a significant public interest to understand how these crimes were committed, the thoughts and actions behind them. We talk about violence in society and we talk about knife crime. But, until we start understanding how these young people are coming to the erroneous decisions and the thoughts and the plans behind what was a horrific attack on a young lady that had her whole life in front of her, unless we start challenging these issues and start learning about how and what they're being exposed to make these decisions, I don't think we're ever going to move forward. And I think it's vitally important that the public has a greater understanding and knowledge of not only the challenges which exist in society, but why these things are happening, so we can start to try and implement things which will make a difference and make a change. But what a horrendous set of circumstances. I truly do feel for the parents who will be grieving on this for forever. It's really, really upsetting.
It is, and as you were saying, the attackers, the murderers, actually drew up a sort of short list of other people they wanted to murder too. It just happened that Brianna was in the wrong place and the wrong time and the wrong place on the list. I mean, it's just appalling. Why would 15-year-olds want to kill and hate people so much?
You know, we talk about what are the consequences of violence in society, and one of those things we talk about is fear, you know, lack of opportunities, but none of those meet this profile on this occasion. These were just two young people who had, for whatever reason, come together and had fantasized over the plan of committing such a heinous crime. And I don't want to make excuses for their conduct, but, you know, one has got to look at maybe the home environment, mental health, you know, what are they exposed to online? You know, what are they seeing which influence these decisions and these thoughts? You know, this isn't what I would consider to be sort of normal behavior. So something is changing in society. And I think we've got to be mindful of that and understanding the cause and effect of this, because, you know, this excuses of opportunities and fear just do not fit the criteria for this horrendous crime. So it's so disturbing as to sort of how this violence around society and the value that we place on life is just at the moment completely diminished.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of social attitudes that possibly need to be looked at with this. There's a lot of sort of hate, distrust and things being generated in society, which obviously can lead to this sort of thing. In the meantime, despite this absolute anguish, I mean, both parents spoke yesterday, and to hear what Brianna's mother said, showing sympathy and concern for the parents of the murderers, I mean, frankly, it's remarkable.
It is. What incredible human beings to display that level of support to what they realise to be parents that have lost their children to an act of sheer violence, you know, and that is a challenge those parents will have to be coming to terms with, is not only probably how people perceive them, but equally what their children have done. You know, every parent wants to bring up their children to love and do well in society and to grow up and in a loving home, and they'll probably have significant questions themselves. But I think it goes to the testament of the bravery of Brianna's parents that they were able to make those comments to ensure the safety and well-being of the families of the two individuals that are obviously going to be facing lengthy life sentences incarcerated. It was remarkable to listen to, and it's got to be applauded.
OK, Oliver, good to see you. Thank you.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the James Bulger murderers were found to have come from not ideal homes and were exposed almost on a daily basis to videos, then it was, of a disgusting nature and a very, very violent nature. Those boys were used to watching that sort of stuff. And you can't help but ask what sort of backgrounds those kids come from.
Yes, well, maybe we shall find out at some point.
But on the other hand, I mean, those boys, yes, killed and murdered Brianna most terribly, but look what they've done to their own families. I mean, their families are probably going to have to move or change their names, or would you want anything to do with one of those murderers now, if you were related in any way? It's just terrible.
It is
Can't
terrible.
quite get your head around it, can you?
Well, we'll be talking live to Sophie Reaper a little bit later on as we await that sentencing and the naming of those two later on this morning.
Now, it's 16 minutes past 8 to politics. The government...
rubbing your hands in glee.
Well, no, not really.
No, there you go.
No,
That's
in fact,
the
I'm
first.
not impressed at all, really. But the government has launched a new campaign to encourage workers to join the early years sector, that's childcare sector, by dangling £1,000 in front of them.
Yeah, and that comes amid concerns about the expansion of free childcare hours. That's going to be sort of bringing it up to 30 hours a week for anyone preschool, and that's going to start in the next 2 months.
Are we impressed by this at all? Let's talk to GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Very good morning to you, Catherine. Is this going to impress anyone, do you think? I mean, we spoke earlier to an Education Minister, and he said, oh, the government is ploughing in more money than ever before into the childcare sector. But they always say that, don't they? And you never really sort of get the feeling that we're seeing anything for that money.
Indeed, indeed. And this £1,000 that the government is offering to new recruits or people coming back to the sector, I think it's worth saying it's only going to be from April. It's only actually a trial in 20 local authorities. So it's really very small scale, though they're launching this recruitment campaign to do something big. But the problem is, of course, that there's this massive expansion in childcare that the government announced many months ago, and the sector feels that the plans, the people are not in place, and the money is simply not in place. I think it's worth having a look at what you can get now in terms of childcare and what you will be able to get. So at the moment, you can get 15 hours of free childcare if you've got a 3 or a 4-year-old. If you're working, you can get 30 hours. But from this April, 2-year-olds will qualify for 15 hours of free childcare. That will be expanded come September to 9-month-olds, and then come the following September, it will be doubled to 30 hours. So, in fact, what the government has announced is a really, really big deal. However, the sector is saying, well, that we simply don't have enough people to provide these spaces, and also we're not being paid anything like enough. So the government is saying we're doubling the money from 4 billion to 8 billion. Ultimately, the sector saying we don't have time for this and you're not giving us enough money to do it fundamentally.
OK, Catherine, thank you. Lots of you getting in touch on that. Keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.com. In the meantime, let's see what the weather's doing with Alex.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Very mild out there this morning. Quite blustery, though, particularly across the north and in western Scotland. It's a wet and windy start. The rain will continue on and off here for most of the day. A bit of drizzly rain at times over southern Scotland and northern England, mostly over the hills here, and the hills and mountains of Wales may be a little bit damp and drizzly at times. And later on, some rain will push into Northern Ireland. Much of the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland, and the far south will just stay dry and cloudy. It is quite blustery, though. Gusty winds, particularly over northeast England, southeast Scotland, along with northern Scotland. But it is very mild. Temperatures in double digits across the board, some places getting into the teens. Through this evening, the rain will ease across northwest Scotland. We'll see the rain moving through Northern Ireland and then turning up in Wales. So turning a bit damp here. Some drizzly conditions elsewhere. Again, mostly over high ground. Many places will just stay dry. And look at the temperatures overnight, staying in double digits across most of England and Wales. A little colder further north with some clearer skies here, but it stays blustery into the weekend across northern Scotland. Further showers packing in. Some rain and drizzle possible at times over southern parts of Wales and southwest England, but something a bit brighter for northern England, Northern Ireland. Some decent spells of sunshine here, although it will be quite breezy once more, although not as gusty as today. Again, very mild in the south, where temperatures could get into the teens.
And he's looking at his new phone.
Oh, yes, can you see?
He's got a new gadget.
A new gadget. No, I was just saying, because you were talking about
It opens up like a book.
Yeah, we're talking about wolf whistling earlier on. Kevin's been in touch. With regard to wolf whistling, all I can say is, morning, gorgeous. Which was sent to me. Morning.
Jolly good.
So there you go.
Jolly good.
Yes, do you like folding phones? Look at that.
Do you know how it folds? Isn't that clever?
Very. I'm a geek.
So thrilled with it. Just got it today.
So pleased.
Yeah.
Anyway, should we move on and tell you, because they cost a bit of money, but you could get an extra £1,500 every month for a whole year.
Well, it might help you buy a phone like that. You could win that in our Great British Giveaway, as an incredible £18,000 cash is up for grabs. Here's how you might be able to win it.
There's an incredible £18,000 in cash to be won in the latest Great British Giveaway. Totally tax-free cash that you could do whatever you like with. That works out to be an extra £1,500 to play with each month for a whole year. Money to make each month just that little bit better. You could put it towards monthly treats, save it for a rainy day, or just use it to take the pressure off in 2024. For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Now, up next, we're asking whether drivers are being victimised, certainly penalised. We'll debate that in just a moment.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
8:26, morning to you. Now, government figures have revealed that changes to the highway code, they were brought in a couple of years ago actually, have led to a surge in the number of fixed penalties issued to drivers.
And these changes include increased priority for pedestrians and cyclists, as well as closing a loophole surrounding the use of mobile phones behind the wheel. So today we're asking, are drivers being victimised yet again?
Let's talk to second-hand car dealer Danny Kelly and the founder of Climate Explorers, Isaac Kenyon. Morning to you both. Danny, what do you reckon?
Hi. Good morning, both. Well, look, it's a punitive world out there if you have the temerity to own a car and get behind the wheel. I can tell you that, Stephen. And as far as the new highway code is concerned, this was introduced 2 years ago. And I would hazard a guess that 80% of the population didn't even know what the hell the new introduction was with the highway code. And there lies the problem. Whether you're a pedestrian who is being beckoned across a busy junction by a kind-hearted motorist, only to be confused when a car on the other side of the road doesn't stop for you, or whether you're a motorist who's trying to turn left at a T-junction and you're having a hand thrust in front of your windscreen by a belligerent highway code knowing pedestrian. It's confusing out there, and I feel sorry for the motorist, I really do.
Yeah, because just to explain, the new rule says that they've got priority rather than you. And the only way to actually sort of make sure that they've got that priority is sort of, I suppose, making eye contact with them and hopefully you both understanding each other.
Yeah, and also, well, that's a great point, because the pedestrian may wonder what the hell you're looking at and why you're staring at them and the hand gestures you're making. And they're thinking, well, who is this random fat bald guy in a Ford Mondeo staring at me, beckoning me across the road? What the hell's he got to do with my pedestrian activity? And there's the problem. But I take you back to a more serious point, Anne, is the fact that roads are so busy. And if I, as a kind-hearted motorist, say, come on, cross the road, and then all of a sudden they cross the road, they could get hit by a car on the other side of the road. It's so confusing. And when this law was introduced, or the highway code was updated, I think that the government, Anne and Stephen, should have blanket bombed the whole of the UK with letters saying, look, if you're a pedestrian or if you're a motorist, here are the new rules. Don't be surprised if someone's going to stop and ask you to cross the road.
Yeah, or not introduced it at all, because it seems crackers, frankly.
Yeah, it's rubbish.
Isaac, what do you make of all of this? I mean, these new rules and regs are brought in. Drivers are paying the cost in terms of more penalties. Is that fair?
I think in the bigger picture, we're trying to move to a more pedestrian and cycle-centric sort of way of living, where they are starting to see that by making the roads slightly safer and allowing more pedestrian and cycle traffic, it creates a more sustainable and active travel world. There are different mechanisms to do that. One of them has been through this as a way of kind of driving that, trying to make it safer, trying to make it a place where people can feel that they can cross a road safely, trying to allow cyclists to have a bit more priority so that people are more encouraged to do cycling or more encouraged to walk.
Yeah, well, forgive me, Isaac, for interrupting, but I mean, it would be safer for pedestrians if they stood on the curb and waited till there were no cars before they crossed the road, wouldn't it? I mean, that seems pretty basic to me.
There is that argument, but there's also the argument if the whole entire culture changed and we all focused on allowing pedestrians to cross, so if we all had the same mindset, then perhaps it would be safe to do this new way of rule.
I'm going to hazard a guess that Isaac isn't a motorist. Isaac, you're not a driver, are you? Or if you are a driver, you drive very few miles, because I would love to live in this idealistic heavenly world that you project and you hope for, but it's just not possible. There are millions of cars on the road, mate, and if you drive in towns and city centres, maybe an idyllic little village in Yorkshire would be ideal for this idealistic image that you have. But in towns and city centres, mate, you know, there's so many cars on the road, and you're going to have to remove them until, before anything like that can actually occur.
Yeah, I'm a motorist. I do drive a car, but what I'm getting at is that I think this is one of the sort of stepping stones to maybe building more infrastructure to make it safer as well. So just these rules are the beginnings of something that might move a bit further along. In other countries, we're seeing lots of segregated cycle paths and things like that. This sort of mindset of pedestrian first and cycle first is probably where we need to get to if we want to create a more sustainable place, you know, encourage active travel and sustainable transportation, especially in cities. We shouldn't really have this many cars in cities. There's more than enough ways to get around public transport.
Can I ask you both about a video that's gone viral, really? Everybody's talking about it. It's about the introduction of low traffic areas, and a couple in a house that's slightly to the left of the screen, their child was unable to breathe, and they called 999, and the ambulance couldn't get to them because of these low traffic area bollards that prevented the ambulance getting them. So there we see the two ambulance workers. They had to trudge down the road, lugging all of their very heavy equipment, while the ambulance, which you saw a bit earlier, and we might see again now, the ambulance, there it is in the background, couldn't go down that road. It had to do a detour and arrived minutes later. Now, there's an instance of something that seems good, a low traffic area. They've got bollards up to prevent lots of cars going down that road, but it actually stopped an ambulance. And this has happened in other areas. Isaac, first of all, you answer me. Is it a good idea, or is it actually a very dangerous thing?
I think if the bollards could be lowered, or if the ambulance has the power to be able to remove the bollards in some way, then actually I think it could work both ways. But currently, yes, that is a clear difficulty for getting emergency services to places in need if you've got these bollards in the way. But the way it was implemented could have perhaps been implemented a bit better, so that we could think through these consequential situations that may happen later, like an ambulance having to get down this road. How can we make that still have the bollard so that we're promoting that sort of low amount of traffic, but also allow for emergency services to get in when they need to?
Andy, what do you think?
Needs to be more work on that.
Well, I think Isaac raises a great point about having something a structure that is movable, but I would suggest that maybe a lot of the residents don't actually want the damn things, but they feel peer pressured and emotionally blackmailed into accepting them when inevitably there'll be some sort of liberal green councillor knocking on their door saying, can we have your support for a massive bollard at each end of the street? Looking objectively at it, and if the ambulance driver, they should have known about the obstruction. So unless that road was obstructed on each end, and I'm not sure about LTNs, whether they're obstructed at each end, I'm just not sure, then that is a consequence of people saying, let's have a low traffic neighbourhood, let's not have a rat run. But if someone has a cardiac arrest, you are aware that the ambulance is going to have to park 400 yards up the road and you're going to have to be carried on a stretcher. So it might have been bad negotiation around the town centre for the ambulance driver, but these LTNs, they're not that popular. If you just Google LTN news, you'll see in the northeast, in Newcastle, neighbours are fed up with it. They really are. They're fed up with this ideology that, harks back to the 1950s, before cars really were everywhere on the road. Neighbours aren't happy with it, but I get why they're there, because kids want to play in safety. I get that. But this is the gritty reality. People might lose their lives.
Yeah, OK. We've got to leave it there, you two, but good to talk to you both. Danny Kelly, Isaac Kenyon, thanks very much.
Thank you. Just to say, in that particular instance, the child was OK, thanks to the paramedics who did manage to make it there.
Joined-up thinking is what we're lacking here, I think. Whether we'll get it from Paul Coyte is a question. No,
not from me, I'm afraid.
No.
I tell you what, there's so much sport going on. It really is literally going to be a lucky dip. I can give you everything that's going on.
What should we start with then?
We've had the transfer window close last night, which is pretty quiet. We've got Lewis Hamilton, who is the biggest transfer of all, who's moving to Ferrari for F1. We've got the cricket, which is live in India at the moment, so that's going on. The Six Nations happens at the weekend. I could go on. There's so much going on.
But don't look outraged. It's your job.
Yeah. I'm not looking outraged. I'm looking to you for guidance there, Anne. I was wondering what you would like me to talk about.
Well, I think football to start with.
I'm certainly not outraged. I love every minute of it. No. Wolves 3, Manchester United 4 last night. Probably the best game of the season, Anne, I think. Even you will enjoy the highlights, I'm sure, which I will play for you. Marcus Rashford, he's had really a hell of a week, hasn't he? And he was on the front page of all the newspapers earlier on this week for his outrageous nights out in Ireland.
He had a tequila or two.
He did. Can you believe such a thing? Young man in tequila shocker.
But he redeemed himself.
He did. He did. Played very well and showed that he is a very good footballer. So, I mean, the way the game went, it was very bizarre. They were 3-2... Manchester United were 3-2 up in the 85th minute. And then you've got Wolves. Pedro Neto scores. Wolves, the whole of Molineux erupts because this is the 95th minute. They're thinking this is going to be the last kick of the game. They finally are going to get a draw against Manchester United, although they were 2-0 down. And then in the 97th minute, Kobbie Mainoo scores for Manchester United. So
proper nail biter.
It's honestly, it's up and down, but it really was a great game. So there's Kobbie there.
It was a tie for the Hammers, though, wasn't it, against Bournemouth?
It was. Calvin Phillips made his debut. Calvin Phillips, who went to Manchester City from Leeds. It didn't really work out for him. He's gone to West Ham on loan and probably, there he is there. And this is probably the moment that he's been consoled because his debut, it wasn't very good. Rusty pass back to the keeper. Dominic Solanke takes the ball off him. 3 minutes. He's already made a mistake, so he's a little rusty. It's probably he'll be fine. I think he'll be fine there in the end. And a little bit of cricket as well. The second test, which is in Visakhapatnam in India. Thank you very much.
Great name.
India won the toss. They're batting 217 for 3, and Shoaib Bashir now, he's the young bowler, the 20-year-old spin bowler that wasn't given the visa to get over for the first test. Now, turned into an international incident, so now he has, and has taken a wicket as well. So it's an interesting start. It's always very difficult to be able to work out how a five-day game is going to go after, like, just lunch on day one.
Yeah.
But they were brilliant, England, when they won the first test.
Just a quick word on the Six Nations, because that kicks off this weekend. I was saying to you in the break, it feels like we've had so much rugby lately.
Yeah, well, that was the World Cup, wasn't it?
Well, yes,
that was it, the World Cup, and
it's
England
never
could be playing. It's not a bad thing, though, is it?
No,
We can never have too much. Six Nations, so it begins tonight. There's a Netflix documentary, so they're trying to get everybody.
I'll be tuned into that.
But the thing is, that's what Netflix do. They did it with F1. They've done it with golf and tennis. So people that mainly wouldn't be as interested, you look at that, then you see the story, you find yourself invested in it. That's me, Anne, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't know whether you
some of those guys are absolute giants, aren't they?
That's what they say about rugby, you see, because it's a game for everybody. It doesn't matter what size you are.
Oh, come on, there aren't any little guys in there.
Well, they are. You could be a fly half there, and Stephen would be a prop. It would be absolutely fine. So Six Nations then starts tonight, and that's France versus Ireland. Both wounded because both hoped to win the World Cup. It was in France, didn't happen for them. And then we've got England playing Italy tomorrow, and Italy, who are kind of the whipping boys. You want to start against Italy. So that's in Rome. Wales against Scotland as well, and Scotland, who just don't win in Wales, but have a very good chance because they beat Wales at Murrayfield last year. So there's loads going on. And Lewis Hamilton, by the way, is going to Ferrari, but that's not till 2025. We've got a whole year to talk about it.
Oh, wow.
Every day for the next year, we'll be discussing that.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Lovely. Thanks, Paul. Now...
I was going to say, dry January is over. But
what relief.
You had a dry January anyway, didn't you?
Yes. Did you do it?
I tried non-alcoholic wine.
Oh, good.
It was horrible.
Spat it out again.
Yeah, it really was.
I think it's quite nice.
But beer associations are trying to persuade us to get back into the pub, apparently. We'll be talking about that in our newspaper review coming up next.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 8:44. Let's see what's making the news this morning with political commentator Andy Williams and the broadcaster Claire Muldoon.
Good
morning.
morning.
Should we go
Morning.
north of the border, Claire?
Why don't we? To a certain former First Minister.
Yeah, so this has been covered a lot, quite rightly too, because of the Scottish COVID inquiry. Now, I think the sub-editors have missed a trick here in the headlines because, of course, this should be the backdrop over the past 48 hours of the old Leslie Gore score. It's my party and I'll cry if I want to.
And she
of
did
course,
cry.
we had, the former First Minister crying crocodile tears. In fact, Alistair Jack said, goodness me, she could cry out of one eye if she had to. She's that duplicitous. And let's look at the facts.
That's fair, because her downfall has been, it must be pretty soul-destroying for her.
Yes, but that's what it is. She's fallen on her sword, Anne. And I think, the SNP are really bad for Scotland. And I wish the Scottish people would wake up and see that. Let's look at the facts. The facts from this inquiry are quite clear. There was an email in July 2020 from John Swinney's account, who was one of the higher echelons, shall we say, of the SNP, signed off by a man called Scott, that the Spanish government would actually block the Scottish move into the EU, and they were worried about that. So for her to say that she didn't make any qualms about the fact that the COVID thing was actually great for her, that she could actually push the narrative for independence, she said, no, that wasn't the case at all. Well, it was. We've got the proof, and it's not just that one email, because obviously they were wanting to have their own fiscal bank.
Yeah, but why does that one email about... Why does that tie into how she handled the pandemic? I don't...
Because she actually said subsequently in this inquiry that she didn't think that the push for independence was made during that time, but it was. It was always on the back burner, because they were always trying to be disingenuous between Westminster, because a devolved government Westminster's got the reserved powers for immigration, OK? But when we're talking about health and social and everything else, but the devolved government has got the control for that, and in some instances tax as well, but not pensions. So there's a few differences, but everyone thought she was a paradigm of virtue during that, getting on her wee soapbox and giving out, this is what we're going to do. And the minute she started to say sawing 2 inches off classroom doors, that was it for me. The woman didn't know what she was doing. Then we've got Jean Freeman, who went down to Westminster, spoke with the then Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, in front of Alistair Jack, the then Scottish Secretary, and not once did Jean Freeman mention the fact that they had an outbreak of COVID at the Nike conference in a hotel in Edinburgh. They keep things to themselves. They lie.
But she gave the impression very well, didn't she, throughout the whole of lockdown, that they were doing much, much better than we were.
But they weren't.
No, but she gave us the impression incredibly well.
How can you trust someone like that?
Well, and also she looked in control compared to Boris Johnson at the time, who was not in control.
She was always first out with a press conference, wasn't she?
She benefited from being let's be fair to her, being a very good communicator.
Yeah.
Being a very good presentational person.
I don't think you can be fair to her, Andy. She's driven Scotland into the absolute ground. Education's fallen off the cliff. Health and safety has gone by the wayside. I mean, there's now... Dundee used to be famous for jute, jam and journalism. It's now famous for junkies, I'm afraid, because the rise in the epidemic of addiction and drugs is vehemently high, higher than the rest of Europe. And she always wants to be part of Europe, so maybe that's the comparison she wants.
Well, look, there are plenty of people north of the border who would disagree with you. We shall see if they still will after the general election.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, very briefly, what's the 2 inches off the bottom of school doors?
Yes, ventilation. So they wasted money sawing classroom doors.
I do not remember that.
No, I don't remember that one. Andy.
Yes.
Something else that's gone off the boil in the sun. The Apprentice. All of these shows, they should ditch them after a couple of seasons.
I couldn't agree more. Alan Sugar, you're fired. We have had enough of The Apprentice. I used to love it.
Yeah,
it was absolutely. When it was good, it was very, very good. It was so entertaining.
But this season's cast, as it were, apparently are absolutely obnoxious.
Oh.
Now, they've always been pretty obnoxious, but apparently it's worse this year.
Apart from Michelle Dewberry, obviously.
Well, of course. But she was early days, wasn't she?
But the more stale the format gets, the more they need to up the ante on as you said, the obnoxious guests. And in The Sun today, they're saying, actually, if you want backstabbing, if you want real drama, go and watch The Traitors, because... I don't know if you watched The Traitors.
I did. It was brilliant.
Haven't tried that yet.
Absolutely phenomenal. Anyone who's watching who's not watched The Traitors yet, go on iPlayer and watch, after you've watched GB News this morning, go and watch The Traitors, because that's proper high-quality backstabbing.
We've had sob stories and a hissy fit, have we, on The Apprentice?
I believe so. I think, Claire, you were watching it last night, weren't you?
I watched it last night, right, and I've never encountered a bunch of morons like them in my life. Absolutely moronic. And actually, going on the whole thing about diversity, the irony was, and I'm actually quite a proud Scot, but they had the task. The task last night was set in Scotland. There wasn't one Scottish contestant in the whole thing.
So we should have just general representation, should we?
That's what they would have you believe if you saw the cast. It's just ridiculous. And they even speak in tech speak. So for me, it's a complete bruv off in it. Sorry.
Is that
yes,
what
yes.
Okay. I tell you what, cast is the way to describe it, though. These things are cast for TV.
Yes, they
are. 100%.
Isn't it? And that's so sad, because the reality of it has actually diminished, because they're actually playing a part.
Yeah.
So there's nothing real about it. It's very manufactured.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we talk childbirth?
Oh, Lord,
I think
do you have to?
No, we don't have to.
Motherhood.
Motherhood.
Claire, the more women than ever are delaying motherhood. Is this causing problems?
Well, it is causing problems, because we've clearly got an issue for keeping us healthy in mind and body when we're older, because there's nothing to underpin it.
Oh, selfish
you see?
then. Selfish. She's going to be looked after.
But yes, absolutely, I do.
No, hang on. If women are delaying motherhood, then they're still working and paying tax right up until they're in their 30s.
Yeah, but Anne, the issue I've got with this is
tax doesn't change your.
No, but listen, they gave a statistic from women born after 1977, so I was 5 years before that, and I've got 4 children. But my mother had my sister when she was 21. I had my first child when I was 26. My eldest is turning 26 now. But the thing I really didn't like about this, they said that, it's because women are in education now. And I think, you don't. It's because you have children younger does not mean you're not educated. What we should be doing is educating people and having homes, in working homes.
No, but the argument is with that, and I can see the argument, they're saying women are becoming more educated, going to, degree level is what they're talking about. Therefore, they're wanting to start a career and not start a family.
Yeah, but that's so sad. But the language that's used in the NHS in terms of IVF treatment that some women have to go through because they can't conceive naturally is things like, your fertility will fall off a cliff at age 30. And yet we've got women bearing naturally children aged 50. So it's the language and the rhetoric and the narrative, I think, has to change. And reports like this aren't helping anything. Yes, we can look at graphs. Yes, we can look at whatever. But the reality is we need more babies in the world and we need more babies in this country, not immigration. We need more children and that's the future.
Well, I've done my bit. Can't do
Stop
any
it,
more.
you.
Council tax going up. And for schools that I don't have any children at.
Very quickly, I suppose we need to end with the fact that those of us who were courageous enough to attempt a dry January...
Talk it up a bit there, Anne Diamond.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, really tried. And if you
How long did you last?
About 3.5 days. But I tried very hard because it's your influence.
Oh,
you
is it?
said non-alcoholic wines taste really good.
Yeah, they're great.
So I thought, the thing is, I was never a wine drinker anyway.
Did your hangover last for 3.5 days? That's why it took you 3.5 days to get back onto Year of the Dog, Anne.
I couldn't drink the stuff. It was like sugar water to me.
Oh, no, it's not. No, it's quite low.
Maybe
it's
I've got
quite
to try a much
calorie.
more expensive one.
Maybe if it's a cheapy one, it might not be any good.
So what is your tipple, Anne?
Oh, I don't have one, Claire.
So, Stephen, if you were to walk into the pub, I know Andy's is a pint because we discussed that.
Yeah.
What would you have? A pint or a non-alcoholic spirit?
I don't drink, but I'd have a pint.
Right, OK.
I like a pint.
And do you know how much the average pint is?
God, it's about £2.50 now.
£3.93. How much were you charged last night?
£7.80.
Yep.
For 1 pint?
Yep. In central London, £7.80.
So, 10 reasons to get back in the pub, not to pay £7, right? But let's get...
But the industry want us to get back in there.
And they
Absolutely.
do. And we've got 10 reasons here, and they're actually quite good.
Yeah.
You know, pubs are now diversifying into quiz nights. It's great for the old grey matter. I love a quiz night.
I used to host a quiz night.
Eh?
I used to host a quiz night.
They're fantastic things.
Quiz nights are brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
And you can eat in pubs, you can get everything together. Some pubs are dog-friendly.
Yeah, they are.
OK?
It's all good.
Yeah, it is all good.
It's all good. And if you're not a drinker, then there's loads of
There's loads of
alcohol-free stuff now.
alternatives.
So I'd never have any bother getting a couple of bottles of alcohol.
Yeah, but you say you have a pint of beer?
Yeah, alcohol-free.
Oh, alcohol-free.
Yes,
Which
great.
apparently is good.
Yeah,
there are some good ones.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're out of time. Good to see you both this
Ring
morning.
the bell, then.
Oh, ring the
Time.
bell. Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. Here's your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Very mild out there this morning. Quite blustery, though, particularly across the north and in western Scotland. It's a wet and windy start. The rain will continue on and off here for most of the day. A bit of drizzly rain at times over southern Scotland and northern England, mostly over the hills here and the hills and mountains of Wales, maybe a little bit damp and drizzly at times. And later on, some rain will push into Northern Ireland. Much of the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland and the far south will just stay dry and cloudy. It is quite blustery, though. Gusty winds, particularly over northeast England, southeast Scotland, along with northern Scotland. But it is very mild. Temperatures in double digits across the board, some places getting into the teens. Through this evening, the rain will ease across northwest Scotland. We'll see the rain moving through Northern Ireland and then turning up in Wales. So turning a bit damp here. Some drizzly conditions elsewhere. Again, mostly over high ground. Many places will just stay dry. And look at the temperatures overnight, staying in double digits across most of England and Wales. A little colder further north with some clearer skies here. But it stays blustery into the weekend across northern Scotland. Further showers packing in. Some rain and drizzle possible at times over southern parts of Wales and southwest England, but something a bit brighter for northern England, Northern Ireland. Some decent spells of sunshine here, although it will be quite breezy once more, although not as gusty as today. Again, very mild in the south where temperatures could get into the teens.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 2nd of February. Today, the man suspected to be behind the Clapham chemical attack was reportedly an asylum seeker, as police are warning members of the public to stay away from the individual if you should see him.
Teenagers convicted of 16-year-old Brianna Ghey's murder are going to be named today as they face life behind bars.
In December, girl X and boy Y were found guilty of Brianna's murder. Today, we expect them to be sentenced and their identities to be revealed.
The government offers £1,000 to encourage people to join the childcare sector amid concerns over its rollout of free hours. Earlier, we spoke to the Education Minister, David Johnston.
What we're doing today is testing if you offer that £1,000 in the 20 areas that we are, does it further increase the number of people that you have applied to join it?
It's very mild out there this morning. It's also a fairly cloudy day. Gusty for some of us with wet weather in western Scotland. A full forecast for today and for Saturday coming up shortly.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Let's start straight away with the main news today, and that is that police manhunt for the suspect in the London chemical attacks. That well and truly underway today, and it comes after reports revealed that the suspect, 35-year-old Abdul Azidi, was convicted of a sexual offence in 2018. He was an asylum seeker. He was refused asylum twice, we've been told, before eventually being granted asylum 2 years ago after he'd been convicted of that offence.
Well, the Met Police have warned very seriously that we must stay away from him if you see him, because he injured so badly 12 people, including 5 police officers and 2 young children.
Well, the suspect was last seen on the Caledonian Road in North London, we're told.
And after that, we don't know where he is. Let's talk now to the former police officer, Harry Tan, who joins us now. And a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. I think everybody is just so shocked that this could have happened, because this suspect should never have been on the streets at all in the first place, should he?
No, and it's very difficult, isn't it? We desperately try not to look with in hindsight and things, but we don't know generally who people are coming into this country asking for asylum. He was refused twice. He got it the 3rd time. There's now this the offence that he was involved in, sexual offence. I think it's widely reported as. So we don't know who is here, and we don't know if the numbers, of course, whether they're numbers of people, whether they're legal or illegal immigrants, is just overwhelming the system again. And I often thought as a police officer, because I did deal with these people, I dealt with acid attack offenders and things like that. When you think in 2022, there were 710 attacks, I was hoping it was sort of reducing, and it was, and let's hope it still has. But we can't underestimate the viciousness of this attack. When you're talking about an extreme alkaline like caustic soda or an acid, like sulfuric acid, you're looking, look at the good people we know, Katie Piper, the presenter, from an ex-boyfriend, widely reported, and she's very bravely showing the issues with regards to that. And of course, Andreas Christoferis, who I believe in Cornwall, 60 operations for a mistaken identity. So it could be terrorist, it could be revenge. In my case, when we were dealing with it, fortunately, we got them within 12 hours. It was a drugs gang that were warring and taking it out on the opposition's family. So it was another mother and baby. So we don't know what it is with this case, I don't think, at the moment, and we should relay open. But it's very, very concerning, isn't it?
Harry, I mean, it's fascinating that you've dealt with cases like this, because what is the mindset of a criminal who is doing this act? Because it's not just about harming people, is it? It's this whole idea that people are being scarred for life, which is a very odd mindset to say, well, I don't want to kill someone, I just want them to very publicly bear these wounds forever and a day.
Exactly, and it's very difficult. I mean, my brother is a primary school teacher in Norway, I think the most qualified primary school teacher in Norway, so he knows about psychology, and he says, Harry, I don't think there's evil people, but they do very evil things. And if you have somebody who's in a country who's witnessed horrendous things happening in front of them, it's not so much of a shift to bring it here. And I remember an overnighter when it used to be fisticuffs and the odd glassing on a nightclub in the evenings, but then it turned to knife crime straight away. And that was Eastern Europeans coming, because it was something that they were socially, that was the culture they were used to, and it came into England. And of course, amongst that, there's some very decent immigrants coming in too, and we shouldn't forget that. But you only need to have a few, don't you? I think what it is, sometimes they don't even look at it. It's such hatred, it's revenge, or they want to show themselves to be the big people, you know, to say, well, they're after another organised crime, they need to get revenge, they're going to need to prove themselves, and they just shut that off completely. They don't think about what the results are. And as Andreas Christoferis said, when it was mistaken identity, when he opened his door, 60 operations, he said, I wish I had been shot instead. And when you're thinking, and we were taught as police officers, when you're dealing with these instances, these shirts that you wear, the black wicker shirts, there's very convenient for not having to iron, maybe, but they melt to your skin. And if you try to take that off, the skin will come with it. Oh. So this is really as nasty as you can get, and it needs to be hit with a sledgehammer to make sure this doesn't start getting worse from now on.
I think what was very remarkable as well about this terrible attack is how many bystanders and neighbours immediately wanted to help. And, of course, they themselves got burned in the process. But it's almost as though they knew what to do. And that was the first question I asked myself. If I was a bystander, would I know what to do? And the answer is water, isn't it? Lots and lots of water.
Knock on the door, get them in a cold shower and whatever is superb. Yes, you're talking about a woman, 31-year-old woman with her 8-year-old child, 3-year-old child, obviously, who's slammed to the floor a couple of times as well. So, and they've got possibly life-changing injuries. Police, 5 police officers. Of course, they've got to have hands-on. They've got to help, and that's going to be on their hands and things. Gloves are not going to protect them necessarily. Public, 4 times public, 3 women and a man involved. Isn't it wonderful to see the community of desperately trying to catch this man who then drove off in his car and crashed into another parked car and then had to go off on foot. So really lovely. I think Lambeth, wasn't it? But you still got that community, that human feeling for other people to say, these people need to be helped. And it's so easy nowadays with just walking on the other side, not wanting to get involved. But it's good to see a bit of humanity again, isn't it?
Yeah, but in the meantime, as you say, we've got a lot of people left reeling from this, and a lot of people not realising, as you mentioned, how many attacks with these corrosive substances that there actually are in the UK. They don't always make the headlines, clearly. How do we even begin to tackle this, do you think? I mean, I was wondering, do we need to make it harder to get hold of these substances, or is that not the answer?
I think it's... I don't think that's the answer. Bit like America with gun crime. I think we're shutting the door after the horse has bolted. It's already out there. We need these things to unblock your drains. Are you going to restrict those? In which case, it will be got hold of. I think if it was your youngsters and who were not really understanding the consequences and going that way, then that might work. But when you're talking, if it's involving gangs, if it's involving quite vicious, nasty people who are doing nasty things, they're very easy to get hold of, or something very similar. What is the answer? It's the ultimate question, isn't it? Because you can educate everyone, but they're the ones who don't want to be educated. They're going to use a gun instead. But to be honest, as Andreas said, he wished he'd been shot as well instead, even though perhaps the fatalities are less likely. With Katie Piper, what a hero she is. How she's shown, a beautiful woman who's had her face so disfigured, and I think, not being PC, she genuinely is still beautiful because her character shines through. But some people aren't that strong. They're not able to deal with that, and so you have the aftermath, which the police deal with, because I deal with road death as well. So I dealt with the humanity of, I went to over 150 road traffic fatalities, also the armed response side of things. So you got both those, and I dealt with people with road accidents, and they couldn't deal with what they were dealing with, and they took their lives. These are the things you don't hear about afterwards.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
It's the psychological effect. Are these, with mothers involved, are the kids going to have the same mother they had before, for example?
Yes.
It's incredibly difficult. We've got to leave it there, Harry, I'm afraid, but really good to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Yes, and just shows we've got to remember not only the civilian victims of that terrible crime, but the police who just leapt in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, OK. What about the other very serious story today, which is about the teenagers who have been convicted of murdering 16-year-old Brianna Ghey? They are going to be sentenced later today.
Yeah, the judge will release the names, we believe, of the murderers, so far known as Girl X and Boy Y. They've argued there's a strong public interest in lifting the anonymity.
Yeah, the judge is Mrs. Justice Yip, and she said people are going to want to know their identities in order to try and understand how such a terrible act was committed.
Well, let's talk to our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper. There is huge public interest in this, Sophie. It is going to be, if nothing else, fascinating to understand who these two actually are.
It will indeed be incredibly fascinating. I'm sure the eyes of the nation will be on Manchester Crown Court today. In just 9 days' time, it will be the 1-year anniversary of Brianna Ghey's death, and the two people responsible for her murder, girl X and boy Y, we're anticipating them being here to receive their sentencing and as well to have their identities revealed. In December of last year, a jury here at Manchester Crown Court found them both guilty on unanimous verdict of Brianna Ghey's murder. We heard throughout that 3-week trial some really rather horrendous details about how girl X and boy Y had planned it carefully. There was a note found in girl X's bedroom that was shown to the court, which detailed exactly how they were going to do it, that they would lure Brianna Ghey to Culcheth Linear Park near Warrington. They would then stab her 28 times with a hunting knife and leave her for dead. We also heard the 999 call made by Catherine Vise, a dog walker who just so happened to come across Brianna Ghey's body. It was really rather horrific. So today we are expecting that sentencing. Justice Yip telling girl X and boy Y that they should be expecting the life sentence, and that the only thing she had to determine was how long they would serve before they could be considered for release. Now, in terms of their identities, as you say, up until this point they've only been known as girl X and boy Y. That's to do with legal restrictions concerning their age. They are both still under 18, but we are anticipating Justice Yip to lift those restrictions today, and we will then be able to bring you their names and their faces. As you say, Justice Yip saying there's considerable public interest and that the public have a right to know who Brianna Ghey's killers are. Now, it will be really interesting. We are expecting the two of girl X and boy Y to be here at Crown Court today and sit in the court. It will be really interesting to see their reactions, because throughout that 3-week trial, neither of them really showed any kind of emotion, any kind of remorse. Even when they were found guilty, they really had no kind of physical outward reaction to this. So as I say, it'll be really interesting today to see what their responses are when Justice Yip delivers their fate.
Yeah, I mean, it will. I mean, it's a case of asking whether or not it's sunk in with them what is actually facing them now. But as we saw in your report earlier on, what is interesting and fascinating and wonderful, actually, is the mother of Brianna, who has said, you know, she has sympathy for the parents of these two murderers, because they too have lost their children and they too will have to live with what their children has done. Now, that shows actually a remarkable strength.
Absolutely, and I think throughout this trial, both Brianna's mother and father have been here. We are expecting them to arrive any minute now. They've shown incredible strength throughout that trial. But what Brianna's mother did say was that although she had sympathy for the parents of girl X and boy Y, she absolutely had no sympathy whatsoever for her daughter's murderers, because throughout that trial, I think she anticipated maybe they would look apologetic, they would look sorry, but absolutely none of that. So she said from that point she had no sympathy for them, just for their parents.
OK, look, we'll catch up with you a little bit later on, Sophie. Thank you.
I think that is remarkable, really, to think of the other families at all.
No, well...
Could you? I couldn't.
Oh, dear. Well, obviously, with that, we think that's going to happen about 10 o'clock this morning. Sophie's going to bring you the latest throughout the day. Now, the government's launched a new campaign to encourage workers to join the early years sector by dangling £1,000 in front of them.
Well, this comes, of course, amid concerns about the expansion of free childcare hours that's going to begin in the next 2 months.
Let's get some light on this with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. I think it's worth exploring, Catherine, what's being offered and how the system is going to change over the next few months.
Yes, it is, because the government's coming in for a lot of flack. But I think worth bearing in mind that what they're trying to do is really very big indeed. Currently, you can only get free childcare when your child turns 3 for like the years that they're 3 and 4 before they start school. The government is going to bring that down to 2 from this April, 15 hours, then from September down to 9 months. And then they're going to double that offering the following September, so that from 9 months onwards, working parents can get 30 hours of free childcare. Now, that can be quite transformative if, of course, the places are there and it's properly funded, which is what the sector are saying is not happening. They're saying they haven't been told how much money they're getting. In general, the existing free places aren't sufficiently funded anyway, and there's a massive crisis in recruitment. I think worth bearing in mind too why they're doing this. They know there's votes in this. The childcare that we have here, some of the most expensive in the world. And also, of course, it means that many women particularly are being locked out of the workplace because they simply can't afford to work and pay those childcare fees.
OK, Catherine, thank you.
And now it's time for the Great British Giveaway. You could win £18,000 in totally tax-free cash to spend however you like. Do you fancy a chance? Well, here's how to do it.
We want to turn 2024 into 2020 more with your chance to win £18,000 in cash to spend however you like. You really could be the next big winner of our Great British Giveaway. Phil from West Yorkshire won our last one. Listen to his reaction when we gave him the news.
I never won a penny in my life.
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, wow.
For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Yeah, best of luck to you, but don't go anywhere just yet. We've got lots more coming up in just a moment.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Now, a chip shop can be a family-run business, but how about having 11 members of your family?
Three generations of Shane Lee's family help out in their flagship store in Hampshire. And Lee started at the age of 14, now has his 4 children and 5 grandchildren chipping in.
Yeah, let's meet the Codfather himself. With some of the family members. Morning to you.
Good morning.
Heck, I bet it costs a lot when you all have a round of chips each. Shane, why did the whole family want to get involved?
It all started at a young age when I was 14 in London, started there and come down to Hedge End in Hampshire at the age of 23, run my own business. Come down with 2 children, now I have 4 and 10 grandchildren. So as they've grown up, we've just got into the business from the young age of 11, coming around helping out, and at the age of 13, coming on the payroll.
OK, so who's the youngest and who's the oldest?
The youngest here, Baby Isla. Baby Isla. She's an up-and-coming server.
No.
I'm the oldest son, John Lee, 41.
And what's the family secret? How do you keep the family all together on the same track, as it were, totally behind the business? My family would fall out straight away.
No, we all get along really well. You know, everyone started at a young age, so they're used to it. You know, they're coming around helping out. Everyone mucks in. Everyone's got their own little jobs that they like to do. And we all work really well as a team.
I tell you what, though, business must be booming then if it's keeping you all in business.
Yeah, going really well at the minute. We have had some tough times over the last sort of 18 months to 2 years. With everything going up, all the energy increases, fish and oil going through the roof. It's been very tough for a lot of chip shops out there. You know, very tough times. And luckily we've got through it all.
OK, so what's the secret of the best batter?
Oh. Go on, let you explain that one. So.
Yeah, nice cold chilled water. Don't over mix it. Mix it nice and fast. Lots of bubbles, lots of air in it. A couple of obviously secret family ingredients, but we can't let you know too much
at the moment.
Our competitors might be watching.
I tell you, and what's the best seller? Is it cod and chips, or do people fancy a Savoy or a pie or whatever these days?
Still predominantly cod and chips, yeah. Curry sauce is really popular. We do a lot of sausages, but yeah, cod and chips is still number one, really.
Mushy peas. Have you got a good supply of mushy peas in?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, it's probably 3/4 curry sauce to 1/4 mushy peas, I'd say.
All right.
Right, so it's a Friday, so it's probably a busy day. What time do you start frying up today?
Open at 11:30, but we've been here this morning doing the curry sauce, mushy peas, pea fritters, peeling the spuds, cutting the fish, and
ready for a busy day. It's our 36th anniversary today in this shop as well.
Oh, is it? Oh, congratulations! Yeah. And I do notice your youngest employee there has got a uniform on, hasn't she?
Yeah. We've got plenty of servers, but we need some more fish fries.
Yeah.
There she is.
God love her. Well, look, really good to see you all. I love going to the Chippy, actually, I have to say.
Yeah, sounds like you must be good. That's it, just in case you're anywhere near, it's at Hedge End in Hampshire.
Lovely.
The Codfather and his brood.
Yeah, fancy a bit of that. Yeah. I tell you what a nice bunch. My grandparents, I've said before, owned a chip shop. And they were very popular people, but I think they gave extra large portions to my dad's mates. So it
Well, that's how to keep the customers.
wasn't the best business practice, but they were very popular people. I think that's my tea sorted tonight.
Oh, absolutely. I'm hungry already.
I'll tell you tomorrow morning when we're back at 6 o'clock.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to